Hello everyone, I know you watched this video to accompany you to sleep. So if you like this video, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Also, don't forget to tell me where you are from and what time you watched this video. Let's jump straight into the story. In the 1980s, in an apartment complex in Tuc Wan, Kowloon, Hong Kong, there lived a man who led a notably carefree life. He had numerous girlfriends and was known for his romantic escapades. Despite having 2 sons, he left their upbringing to his ex-partners. He never married and led an idle single life. However, his background was far from ordinary, and no one dared to cross him, allowing him to live in comfort. But such days didn't last forever, as one day his fate took a drastic turn. On Sunday, January 13, 1985, the residents of an apartment building on Tuc Wan Road, Kowloon, Hong Kong, gathered to discuss an issue that had been troubling them. For over a month, all the building's restrooms had experienced unexplained issues, often becoming unusable. The problem was particularly severe on weekends when water demand increased, forcing residents to wait in long lines just to use the bathroom. Frustrations were mounting, and complaints were growing louder. That morning, the situation worsened, with no water at all in the restrooms, severely disrupting daily life. Unable to endure the problem any longer, the residents convened to discuss solutions. They concluded that the rooftop water tank, which hadn't been cleaned for years, was likely clogged with sediment. The residents decided to pool funds and hire professionals to clean it. 2 repairmen were promptly hired and sent to the rooftop. Upon inspecting the tank, they opened its lid, looked inside, and confirmed that sediment buildup was the likely cause. They began cleaning immediately. At 9:15 a.m., after 30 minutes of work, the repairmen had drained most of the water from the tank. They donned protective gear and climbed into the tank. While cleaning, one of the workers discovered a round object covered in thick black sludge amidst the debris. Unsure of what it was, he handed it to his colleague, who examined it closely and screamed in terror. It was a human skull. The Kowloon police arrived at the scene shortly after being notified. They prepared to retrieve all the contents of the water tank. During their investigation, they noticed something embedded in the concrete at the bottom of the tank. Firefighters were called to assist in extracting it. After some time, the concrete block was cut open, revealing 3 yellow suitcases encased in the concrete and submerged at the bottom of the tank. Once retrieved, investigators found human bones inside each suitcase. Initial assessments suggested the victims had been dead for several years, making it impossible to determine the cause of death. Additionally, the tank contained items such as bed sheets, a folding chair, and a bird cage. In one compartment of the suitcases, they found a photograph. Though the image was badly blurred due to prolonged water exposure, a handwritten note on the back remained legible. Through technical analysis, investigators determined that the back of the photograph contained 3 characters, with the middle character being Ing. The items recovered from the tank were presumed to belong to the victims, and the photograph was likely of one of them. Initial theories suggested that the perpetrator, in their haste to dispose of the bodies, had neglected to destroy the photo, leaving behind a crucial clue. The discovery of human remains in the water tank shocked the residents to their core. They were horrified to realize that the water they had been drinking for years had been contaminated by decomposing bodies. Some people began vomiting on the spot, while others started packing their belongings, preparing to move out as early as the next day. 2 days later, on January 15th, forensic experts successfully reconstructed the skeletal remains. After examination, they determined that the victim was a male, aged between 25 and 40, approximately 5 feet 5 inches tall, and had been dead for about 5 years. The exact cause of death remained unclear, but there was a distinct sharp cut on the right side of the body, suggesting the victim had been murdered, dismembered, and stuffed into the suitcases. On January 16th, police suspected that the victim might be connected to someone living in the building. They summoned all residents to the police station for individual questioning. During the investigation, they uncovered that a man had indeed gone missing from the building 5 years earlier. His description closely matched the victim. The man's name was Deng Jia, who was years old at the time of his disappearance. He had been a prominent member of the notorious Wuxian gang in Hong Kong. Known for his bravery, combat skills, and agility, Deng had risen to become a top enforcer in the gang, holding a high position. However, at the age of 29, he was severely injured in a gang fight. After recovering, he expressed a desire to leave the criminal underworld. He then spent most of his time wandering around the apartment complex, often carrying a birdcage on his strolls. Police noted that the second character in the name on the photo recovered from the water tank was Ing, which matched the second character in Angie's name. His age, habits, time of disappearance, and other clues aligned perfectly. The police immediately contacted Angie's family to assist with the investigation. His family identified the photo and other items recovered from the tank, confirming that the victim was indeed Angie, who had vanished 5 years earlier. The revelation stirred up significant buzz among the residents, with some even displaying smug expressions. It was later revealed that Ingjia had been a notorious figure in the apartment complex. After his severe injury in a gang fight, he suffered complications leading to sexual dysfunction. This left him insecure, but his arrogant nature drove him to brag about it in a bizarrely ostentatious manner. Known for his womanizing, Ingjia claimed to have many girlfriends, but frequently harassed respectable women in the building, groping them or even exposing himself and urinating in front of them. In addition to exploiting others, he had a habit of flashing his private parts in public. Terrified by Engia's underworld connections, the neighbors dared not confront him, but secretly harbored deep resentment. After 1980, however, the troublesome figure suddenly vanished. While Engia's father reported his disappearance to the police, the neighbors, who despised him, refused to provide any leads. With no clues to follow, and considering his criminal background, the police assumed Ingjia had fled to escape retribution from his gang rivals. The case was soon forgotten. Ingjia's landlord reported that 5 years earlier, he had disappeared suddenly, leaving behind a significant unpaid rent debt. The landlord searched extensively, but ultimately gave up after finding no trace of him. The police began investigating Deng Ingjia's connections. Given his background, neighbors speculated that someone with a vendetta against him in the criminal underworld might have killed him. However, the police disagreed. With years of experience dealing with organized crime, they were familiar with the methods typically used by such groups. Gang killings were often meticulously planned, with bodies weighted and dumped into the sea, efficient and decisive. In contrast, Inga's remains had been dismembered and stuffed into suitcases, with some of his personal belongings scattered at the disposal site. This suggested the killer lacked access to transportation and had been in a panicked state. While handling the body, the police theorized that this was likely a crime of passion, committed impulsively by someone who had lived in the apartment complex 5 years earlier. On January 20th, the police summoned the building's residents again, seeking information about those who had lived there 5 years prior. Despite the large number of residents, there hadn't been significant turnover. Over the past 5 years, only 2 households had moved out, a couple surnamed Chun and a young couple. The Chens moved in November 1983, citing their desire to reunite with their son. The young couple moved out in May 1980, claiming they had been allocated a new home. However, further investigation revealed that while the young couple had indeed received new housing, it wasn't until 1982, 2 years after they moved out. This meant they had lied about their reason for leaving, and their departure coincided closely with Ingjia's disappearance, making them prime suspects. The young couple was identified as Wu Xiutai and Liang Yufeng. At the time of the incident, Wu was 22 years old and worked as a chef, while his girlfriend Fong was about the same age. Despite their youth, they already had a 4-year-old son. According to neighbors while living in the complex, Wu worked long hours, leaving early and returning late, while Fong stayed home as a homemaker, managing the household. Fong's beauty and youthfulness inevitably drew the attention of Ingjia, known for his predatory behavior. He frequently harassed Fong, making inappropriate advances and outright propositions. Fong was deeply distressed and often cried to her boyfriend about Ingjia's behavior. Normally mild-mannered and reserved, could not tolerate seeing his girlfriend being mistreated. Every time Ingjia tried to harass Fong, Wu would confront him, leading to escalating tensions between the two men. At this point, the police had uncovered a potential motive for the young couple. The following day, they visited their residence in Jyotakak village, but what they found left them stunned. Upon entering the house, they saw a shrine in the living room with a photograph of a young woman. Wu sat nearby murmuring, "Retribution, it's all retribution. I caused Fong's death." When the police arrived, Wu made no attempt to hide anything, and confessed the full story of how he and his girlfriend had killed Ingjia 5 years earlier. The investigators were shocked by Wu's account. It turned out that the young couple were not cold-blooded murderers, but desperate individuals pushed to their limits by a dark and oppressive force, leaving them no choice but to fight back. In early 1979, Wu Shutai, then 17 years old, met Fong, who was the same age. The two quickly fell in love due to their shared interests and compatible personalities. 6 months later, they moved in together, sharing a small room of less than 110 square feet on the 7th floor of an apartment building on Taklahuan Road. Thanks to his skills, easily secured a stable job as a chef. Seeing himself as a responsible man, he took it upon himself to provide for Fong, who stayed home while he worked. Shortly after moving into their new home, Fong became pregnant. This made Wu even more determined not to let her work. Although life became a bit more challenging financially, their love and togetherness made them feel happy and content. They believed that time would pass peacefully, that they would get married, raise their child, and live happily ever after in that place. However, their tranquil life was soon upended by the arrival of an unwelcome intruder who turned their world upside down. Fong and Wu's modest home had only a large bed and a basic cooking area. There was no private bathroom, so they had to use the communal facilities for bathing, washing, and other necessities. The door to their room was nothing more than a thin curtain offering little privacy or security, effective against the honorable but not the malicious. Since Wu worked long hours as a chef, leaving early and returning late, Yingjia, who was idle and unemployed, began fixating on Fong, drawn to her youthful beauty. He started spying on her through the flimsy curtain, and even followed her to the communal bathroom, where he would peep at her while she bathed or used the restroom. Deng Yingjia was not only a perverted exhibitionist, but also a voyeur with a twisted obsession. He would deliberately allow his presence to be noticed by the person he was watching, relishing their discomfort. Fong quickly realized Yingjia's intentions, but being pregnant and physically vulnerable, felt powerless to confront someone with his underworld connections. She could only endure the harassment silently, waiting until Wu returned home to tell him what had happened. Wu was heartbroken upon hearing her accounts. Despite Yingjia's gang affiliation, Wu couldn't stand by while his girlfriend was being tormented and decided to confront him. However, Yingjia dismissed Wu entirely and continued his behavior, growing even bolder. He began barging into the communal restroom while Fong was inside, exposing himself and staring at her while she bathed. On one occasion, he shamelessly demanded in front of other tenants that Wu lend him Fong for a few days. When Wu reacted with anger, Yingjia mockingly told him not to be so petty, claiming that Fong could cure his impotence. The young couple's frustration and anger grew as Yingjia's harassment escalated. They desperately wanted to move out of the building, but their financial situation made it impossible. They had borrowed money to cover the rent, which had to be paid a year in advance, and the landlord would not refund their payment if they left. Trapped by their circumstances, the young couple had no choice but to stay, enduring daily humiliation and suffering. However, their patience and tolerance failed to deter Yingjia, continued his relentless harassment. A month later, things took a turn for the worse. While Fong was cooking at home, Yingjia suddenly barged in and assaulted her. He tore at her clothes and attempted to violate her. Fong fiercely resisted, and taking advantage of a moment of distraction, managed to escape to another room in the apartment. However, Yingjia wouldn't let up and stood blocking the door, hurling obscene insults at her. With most of the other tenants out at work, only the two of them were left in the building. Fong collapsed to the ground in fear, trembling and crying as she struggled to keep the door shut. That evening, when Wu Shutai returned from work and learned what had happened, he decided it was time to stand up to Yingjia. On April 5th, during the Qingming festival, had the day off. Early in the morning, he gathered all his courage, stormed into Yingjia's room and shouted, "I'm warning you, if you dare touch Fong again, I'll beat you to a pulp." Yingjia glanced at Wu with disdain, sneering at his flushed and furious face. In a mocking tone, he retorted, "She came to me willingly. Honestly, I wasn't even interested. She just kept climbing into my bed." Wu couldn't take the humiliation any longer and began arguing heatedly with Yingjia. Their voices grew louder until Yingjia, now fully awake, snapped. Enraged, Wu unleashed all the pent-up frustration and anger he'd been suppressing for months, insulting Yingjia and mocking his impotence. Already looking down on Wu as poor and weak, Yingjia now felt utterly humiliated by these taunts about his deepest insecurity. Furious, he jumped out of bed and lunged at Wu, ready to fight. Although Yingjia was in his 30s and had once been a skilled fighter, his reflexes had dulled over the years. Instead of overpowering Wu, he ended up being beaten badly. Eventually, Ingjia fell to his knees, begging for mercy. Wu, having vented his anger, turned to leave. But less than 5 minutes later, the curtain over the doorway was ripped aside. Wu turned to see Ingjia standing there, wielding an 18-inch butcher knife, charging toward him with murderous intent. Determined to kill the insolent boy who had humiliated him, Ingjia was out for blood. Wu silently thanked the heavens that Fong wasn't home. Desperate to save his life, he tried to wrest the knife away from Ingjia. The two struggled fiercely in the room, but with his opponent armed, Wu began losing ground. At the critical moment, Liang Yufang suddenly burst into the room, grabbing a folding chair. She struck Ingjia hard on the back of the head. Ingjia collapsed to the ground, unconscious. In a moment of blind rage, Wu grabbed the butcher knife and stabbed Ingjia repeatedly. Blood pooled across the floor in a bright red puddle. Fong, horrified and overcome with nausea, clutched her stomach and ran to the bathroom to vomit. A while later, Wu regained his composure and looked at the blood-soaked floor in terror, unsure of what to do next. He thought about turning himself in, but realized the consequences. He was still young and Fong was pregnant. How could he throw their lives away because of a thug like Ingjia? Sitting on the floor in a daze, began to consider his options. After some time, the young couple decided to clean up the scene. Lacking experience in disposing of a body, they decided to dismember it and find a way to hide the remains. Wu found 3 suitcases in Ingjia's room and used them to store the body. He then poured concrete into the suitcases to seal them. However, Ingjia's right arm had stiffened and wouldn't fit, forcing Wu to saw it off before placing it in one of the suitcases. The entire process was rushed and chaotic, so much so that the young couple forgot to check if the suitcases contained any of Ingjia's identification documents. This oversight allowed the police to later identify the victim through the photograph found in one of the suitcases. After finishing their grim task, they realized that carrying 3 suitcases filled with concrete and a body would draw too much attention, making it nearly impossible to dispose of them without being noticed. First, the area around Tuchuan Road was densely populated and busy, offering no suitable location for discreet disposal. Second, the couple lacked transportation to move the remains far from the building. In the end, they decided to use the rooftop water tank. Wu Xiutai reasoned that few people ever checked the tank, and that burying the suitcases in concrete at the bottom would ensure they were never discovered. To avoid suspicion, they chose a time when no one was using water. In the early hours of April 6th, they successfully submerged the 3 suitcases at the bottom of the water tank. Upon returning to their room, they noticed blood-stained items still lying around, including a birdcage. Hastily wiped up the blood with a shirt and wrapped all the bloodied items, such as the birdcage and folding chair, in a bedsheet before throwing everything into the water tank. Ingjia had always been an aggressive and unpleasant figure, disliked by everyone in the building. After his disappearance, the residents, though slightly curious, were relieved to see him gone as life became more peaceful without him. No one cared to get involved. Even when Ingjia's father later reported his disappearance to the police, the residents refused to cooperate, unwilling to entangle themselves in the matter. Eventually, Ingjia's apartment was rented out to new tenants. A month later, in May 1980, the young couple could no longer bear living beneath the hidden remains of their victim. Using the excuse of being allocated a new house, they moved away from Takuan to a small wooden house in Yao Tao Kok. There, they got married and had a daughter. By 1982, they were truly assigned a new home and moved into a spacious and modern apartment. Life seemed to improve steadily, and they believed they had escaped Ingjia's shadow. However, a series of strange events soon shattered their peace. In September 1984, Fong began showing signs of mental instability. She frequently dreamed of Ingjia lying in a pool of blood on the floor. Wu too experienced recurring nightmares in which Ingjia appeared, threatening to seek revenge and claiming he would take their daughter's life in return. After much thought, Fong decided to visit Wang Tai Sin Temple to pray for her family's safety. However, when she received her fortune slip, she was horrified. It was an extremely ominous one. Being highly superstitious, Fong became terrified and immediately consulted a fortune teller at the temple. The fortune teller told her that all their misfortunes stemmed from their own actions, and that only they could resolve the calamity they had caused. Overwhelmed with fear, Fong rushed home to tell Wu everything. From that day forward, the couple began praying earnestly every day. Wu even pleaded, asking that if Ingjia wanted revenge, he should target Wu and spare their daughter. A month later, as if fate had intervened, Jie's revenge seemed to manifest. In October 1984, Fong visited another fortune teller. On her way back, the vehicle she was riding in suddenly lost control and overturned. Fong was thrown from the vehicle and knocked unconscious. Her companion was also rendered unconscious. When they regained consciousness, they found that Fong had already passed away. The circumstances of Liang Yufeng's death were exceedingly strange. She had no visible injuries on her body. When the accident occurred, she was ejected from the vehicle and landed face down in a shallow puddle less than 2 inches deep. In this inexplicable position, she drowned. When Wu learned the cause of his wife's death, he became convinced it was the work of Jie's ghost. Years ago, he had stuffed Jie's body into a suitcase and thrown it into the water tank. Now, his wife had drowned in a puddle barely 2 inches deep. Wu wept as he told the police, "I've lived in fear and guilt all these years. Especially recently, when I saw the news that the body in the water tank had been discovered." A witness claimed that years earlier, they had seen several strong men carry an unconscious person to the rooftop and throw them into the water tank. The witness said they had tried to intervene, but the man ignored them. We knew the story wasn't true, but it deepened his unease. Now, after being arrested, he felt a strange sense of relief. However, the strange occurrences didn't end there. When the police took Wu Shutai to the second crime scene for a reenactment, an eerie cold wind swept through the sealed room. The police's video camera suddenly went dark, and it took some effort to get it working again. When they reviewed the footage, everyone broke out in a cold sweat. Every time the officer playing the role of Jie appeared in the frame, his face became blank, as if it were a special effect from a horror movie. The incident was so bizarre that Wu was gripped with terror. Could it be that Jie still hadn't let go? Wu furrowed his brows, anger flickering in his eyes, but the rage quickly subsided. He thought to himself that he had lived in torment for the past 5 years. Perhaps it was time to pay for his sins. Strangely, as if sensing Wu's thoughts, when the officers completed the reenactment and returned to the scene, everything returned to normal, and the reenactment proceeded smoothly. In July 1985, the case went to trial at the Hong Kong High Court. Wu was charged with murder. During the trial, Wu admitted to all his actions. He stood calmly in the defendant's box, awaiting judgment, with no hope left for the future. However, the situation took an unexpected turn. After 3 hours of deliberation, the jury reached a unanimous decision. The court declared Wu not guilty of murder, and he was released immediately. The jury found that Wu had killed Jie in legitimate self-defense, and without premeditated intent to murder. The judge noted that Wu had already lived with guilt and remorse for the past 5 years. He also pointed out that Jie, during his lifetime, had been a notorious troublemaker who had committed many misdeeds. If not for his own actions, the judge remarked, how could he have met such a tragic end? Neighbors also came forward to expose Jie's crimes, with no one defending the gangster's reputation. The Tuk Kwa Wan water tank case caused a public uproar in Hong Kong, sparking widespread debate. Many questioned the circumstances, pointing out that the crime had occurred on Qingming Festival, a day when most residents were home for the holiday. If there had been a fight or even a murder, surely the noise would have been loud enough for neighbors to hear something. Wu Shutai, a once-spirited young man, though acquitted, found his life irrevocably altered. After the trial, his eyes still bore the weight of exhaustion and unrelenting sorrow. Leaving the courtroom, he stepped into the bustling crowd, but it felt as though he was surrounded by an oppressive void. Even the blazing Hong Kong summer sun couldn't lift the dark shadow looming over his heart. Though he was free, his soul remained imprisoned in the unrelenting confines of his conscience. In the years that followed, and his young daughter moved to a new home, far from the haunting memories of the past. He never spoke to his daughter about her mother, nor did he dare to utter the name Deng Jie. He immersed himself in work, trying desperately to forget. But each night, the gruesome images of the crime returned to haunt him. Wu Shutai understood that while the court had declared him innocent, he could never escape the punishment he inflicted upon himself. The scar on his heart would remain with him for the rest of his life, a permanent reminder of his mistakes and the heavy price of his actions. The Takwalwan water tank case left a lasting impression on those who heard it. Story 2 every year from April 13th to 15th, Thailand hosts its most grand and joyful celebration of the year, the Songkran Festival, also known as the Water Festival. However, during the Songkran Festival of 2024, what captured the attention of the entire Thai population was not the festivities, but a deeply mysterious and shocking murder case filled with unbelievable twists that rocked public opinion. The main character of this story is Pikhit Jinda, a 44-year-old man who ran a successful Thai hydrotherapy massage parlor in Bangkok. The business was thriving, and the income was substantial. His wife, 37-year-old Wanapa Hamala, was known for her beauty. The couple deeply loved each other and, after 15 years of marriage, had 3 children. Together, the family of 5 enjoyed a prosperous life, free from financial worries. On April 13, 2024, the first day of the Sangkran festival in Thailand, Wanapa took their children back to her hometown in Maha Sarakam province, located about 250 miles from Bangkok. Pikhit stayed behind in Bangkok to manage the massage parlor. During the festival, Pikhit sent messages to his wife, expressing how much he missed her and the kids and his desire to be with the family for the celebration. Touched by his words, Wanapa booked him a flight and encouraged him to close the massage parlor for 2 days. After the festival, they could all return to Bangkok together. Following her advice, Pikhit took a flight to Maha Sarakam. That evening, his mother-in-law prepared a lavish dinner to welcome him. The family celebrated late into the night, raising glasses to toast. After a few glasses of rice wine, Pikhit fell asleep in a garden gazebo. But tragedy quietly struck that night. On Tuesday, April 16, 2024, the first day after the Sangkran festival ended, at 6 a.m., Pikhit's mother-in-law woke up to tidy the yard. She noticed Pikhit still sleeping in the gazebo, and concerned he might catch a cold, called out to him several times, urging him to come inside. When he didn't respond, she approached and gently tried to wake him, only to discover that his body had gone cold and stiff. Panicking, she rushed inside to wake her daughter, Wanapa, who was still fast asleep. Startled by her mother's cries, Wanapa jumped out of bed and ran outside. Seeing her husband unresponsive, she froze in shock, unsure of what to do. Gathering herself, she quickly called the nearest clinic. A doctor arrived promptly, and after an examination, confirmed that Pikhit had passed away, estimating his time of death to be the previous night. Pikhit's sudden death left Wanapa devastated and unable to comprehend what had happened. Her husband had lived a disciplined life, exercised regularly, and was joyful and healthy just the night before, while reuniting with his family. Why had he died so suddenly without any warning signs? She couldn't shake the suspicion that he might have passed away from excessive drinking. Overwhelmed with grief and confusion, she began making arrangements for his funeral. 3 days later, Wanapa organized a solemn funeral for her husband. The atmosphere was heavy with grief. Friends and family mourned the untimely death of Pikhit, who passed away at such a young age. They also deeply sympathized with Wanapa, as she now had 3 young children to care for. After burying her husband, Wanapa believed she could start anew with her children. However, the events that followed thrust her into the center of public scrutiny. Pikhit had a younger sister named Nathafat, who was 42 years old. Over a month after the incident in mid-May, she unexpectedly held a press conference and publicly declared that her brother's death was not an accident, but a murder. In her statement, she pointed fingers at her sister-in-law, Wanapa, alleging that she was involved in Pikhit's death. Nathafat revealed that her brother had purchased a life insurance policy worth 16 million baht, approximately $460,000, and the primary beneficiary was none other than Wanapa. She formally requested the insurance company to withhold the payout until the police could uncover the truth. The insurance company expressed their full support for this request. Following the press conference, the case went public and drew widespread attention. Various conspiracy theories circulated online, with rumors alleging that Wanapa had orchestrated her husband's death to claim the insurance money. Under mounting public pressure, the police established a special task force to investigate Pikhit's death and address the public's doubts. The victim, Pikhit, was born in 1980 in Bangkok, making him 44 years old at the time of his death. He was the eldest in his family, with 1 younger sister, Nathafat. Pikhit operated a thriving Thai hydrotherapy massage business in Bangkok. In his daily life, he was highly disciplined and regularly exercised. Despite being in his 40s, he appeared youthful and full of energy. Pikhit was also sociable and often relaxed with friends at bars over a few drinks. The police interviewed Nathafat about her suspicions. She explained that she initially believed her brother's death was an accident. However, when she saw his body at the funeral, she began to harbor doubts. She recalled that her brother's skin had turned an unusually dark color, resembling signs of poisoning. At the time, She voiced her concerns to her sister-in-law, suggesting an autopsy. To her surprise, Wanapa immediately dismissed the idea, insisting that they shouldn't disturb the dead and that Pickett should be allowed to rest in peace. Shortly after, Wanapa had Pichett's body cremated. After the funeral, Nathafat grew increasingly suspicious. She remembered that her brother had mentioned purchasing a significant life insurance policy, with Wanapa as the beneficiary. Nathafat suspected that her sister-in-law might have murdered Pickett for financial gain. This revelation sent chills down her spine. After much deliberation, she decided to expose what she believed was her sister-in-law's scheme and hoped the police could uncover the truth, to bring justice for her brother. The police then contacted the doctor, who examined Pickett on the day of his death. The doctor reported that he found nothing unusual during the examination. At that time, Pichett's skin appeared normal with no discoloration. The police also interviewed funeral home staff. They stated that when they arrived at the scene, they didn't notice anything out of the ordinary. Their examination revealed no injuries on the body, leading them to conclude that sudden illness had caused the death. However, 3 days after transporting the body, they noticed that Pichett's skin had turned black, a stark contrast to its previous appearance. While they found this change strange, they attributed it to natural factors and didn't think much of it. The police continued to interview family members and friends who had attended the funeral to gather more information. Some noted that Wanapa's behavior seemed unusual. During the funeral, many relatives and friends observed that Pichett's skin appeared abnormal and advised Wanapa not to rush the cremation, suggesting she wait for the results of an autopsy before making a decision. However, for reasons unknown, she insisted on proceeding with the cremation, ignoring everyone's advice. Unable to intervene, they had no choice but to let her proceed. A crematorium worker came forward to speak with the police. He stated that in all his years of experience, he had never seen a body as black as coal. Based on these leads, the police considered the case rife with suspicious elements. They speculated that Wanapa might have meticulously planned this event to claim the substantial insurance payout. They then approached Wanapa for questioning. She firmly denied any involvement in her husband's death and any attempts to commit insurance fraud. She provided police with her chat history with Pickett, which showed that 2 days before the incident, Pickett had messaged her saying he missed her deeply. In response, she had purchased a plane ticket for him to travel from Bangkok to Maha Sarakam. Wanapa recounted the events of April 15th in detail. That evening, everyone had been celebrating the Sangkran festival with drinks in a lively atmosphere. Late into the night, Pickett, drunk, fell asleep in the garden gazebo. Wanapa said she had tried to wake him and urged him to come inside to avoid catching a cold, but Pickett insisted on staying outside. She then brought him a pillow and blanket, sat with him for a while to ensure he was sound asleep, and only then returned to the house. The next morning, she discovered what had happened. Wanapa explained that she had refused an autopsy because she found the idea too cruel. As a grieving wife, she was devastated by her husband's sudden death. No one wanted Pickett alive more than she did, especially since they had 3 young children. As for why his skin had turned black, she admitted she also found it strange, but assumed it was due to natural causes. At this point, the police were left without solid leads and could not determine whether Wanapa had intended to harm her husband. Moreover, with Pichett's body already cremated, they could not uncover the true cause of his death. Pichett's sister Nathafat was later invited to appear on a television program. During the broadcast, she revealed several photos of her brother taken before the cremation, showing his body unnaturally black, which looked highly unusual. The program also featured a forensic expert who carefully analyzed the photos and made some startling conclusions. Pichett's death was not accidental. Based on the discoloration of his skin, it was evident he had been poisoned, although the specific toxin could not be identified. The expert, who had over 15 years of experience, noted that he had never encountered a case where the entire body turned black like Pichett's. Additionally, Nathafat presented on the program a death certificate issued by the clinic. The cause of death was recorded as undetermined. However, the forensic expert clarified that this certificate alone did not provide conclusive evidence. It was likely that the local doctor who examined Pickett had found no visible injuries on the body, and had recorded the cause of death as undetermined due to a lack of other findings. This did not necessarily mean that Pickett had been murdered. The broadcast of the television program caused a public uproar. News about a supposed plot to murder her husband and commit insurance fraud spread rapidly. Almost everyone criticized Wanapa, branding her as a heartless woman. Under the growing pressure of public opinion, Wanapa was invited to appear on the same television program. She wore black clothing and a mask, looking visibly worn out. During the program, she expressed that she had been devastated since her husband's passing. She explained that she had to handle all the arrangements, care for her 3 young children, and was completely drained both physically and emotionally. She had thought that after completing all these tasks, she could take some time to rest, but instead, she was falsely accused and forced to cooperate with a police investigation. She explained that she didn't want to escalate the situation, believing that if the police couldn't find any evidence, the matter would eventually die down. However, her sister-in-law, Nathafat, disregarded family ties and went on television to accuse her, prompting many uninformed people to start personally attacking her. Some even made harassing phone calls. This kind of life had left her feeling utterly hopeless. Having already lost her beloved husband, she now had to endure immense public pressure. Unable to bear it any longer, she decided to speak out to clear her name. Wanapa further explained that she and her husband had been living in Bangkok, managing their massage parlor together. She deeply loved her husband, and their relationship had always been strong. While her husband was in relatively good health, he did have a habit of drinking. Whenever he was drunk, he would often raise his voice and scold her, leading to frequent arguments over his drinking. However, these fights were never serious, and they would quickly reconcile afterward. Earlier in April, her husband had secretly gone drinking at a bar and staggered home late at night. Worried about his health, she confronted him, leading to a heated argument. Frustrated, she took their 3 children and stayed at a hotel. With the Sangkran festival approaching, she decided to take the children to her family's home in Maha Sarakam. During this time, the couple lived apart, but stayed in regular contact via text messages. On April 15th, Pickett traveled from Bangkok to Maha Sarakam. That evening, he drank heavily again, and unexpectedly, he passed away the following morning. Wanapa attributed her husband's sudden death to prolonged alcohol consumption, which had weakened his body. She explained that the cremation 3 days later was in accordance with local customs, not an attempt to destroy evidence. As for why her husband's body turned black, she admitted that she couldn't explain it either. In summary, she insisted that she had done nothing wrong. Wanapa also claimed that her sister-in-law, Nathafat, rarely visited the family, and hardly ever stayed in touch throughout the year. Now that her husband had passed, Nathafat suddenly appeared and began making baseless accusations. Wanapa believed that Nathafat, knowing about the life insurance policy, was trying to create trouble to claim the insurance money for herself. Wanapa pointed out that Nathafat was financially unstable, lacked a steady job, and frequently asked their parents for money in secret. During the program, Wanapa presented chat logs showing Nathafat's repeated requests for money from their parents, often citing various excuses. The logs revealed that almost every month, Nathafat found a reason to ask for financial help. Wanapa argued that it was unsurprising for someone like her sister-in-law to slander others for financial gain. Wanapa's words deeply resonated with the television audience, and public opinion swiftly shifted. People began directing their criticism toward Nathafat, accusing her of being the greedy one who would stoop to falsely accusing others for financial gain. Just as the live broadcast was about to conclude, the organizers received a mysterious call. The caller, identifying herself as MWA, a devout Buddhist and a close friend of Pickett, shared shocking new information. According to MWA, 8 days before Pickett's death, he had been attacked by 2 men in Bangkok, but managed to escape unharmed. Pickett had confided this frightening experience to her. Moore recounted what Pickett had told her. On the evening of April 8th, while Pickett was working at his massage parlor, he received a message from his wife, Wanapa, saying that she had reserved a table at a luxury restaurant in Bangkok and wanted him to join her for dinner. At the time, the couple was separated, with Wanapa staying at a hotel with their 3 children. Thrilled by what he believed was an attempt at reconciliation, Pickett eagerly closed the parlor early and drove to the restaurant. Upon arriving, he found that his wife had not yet arrived. Thinking she might be running late, he ordered a bottle of fine wine, intending to enjoy it together once she arrived. After waiting for some time, Pickett texted her to ask when she would arrive. To his dismay, Wanapa replied that she had changed her mind and didn't want to come anymore, telling him to head home instead. Feeling dejected, Pickett canceled the wine order and drove back home. On his way, as he was driving along Ramantra Highway, a motorcycle suddenly sped up behind him. Two men were on the bike, and the one sitting on the back pulled out a gun and fired 4 shots at Pickett's car. Fortunately, Pickett noticed them in time, and with his car windows closed he escaped unharmed. However, the incident left him deeply shaken. He became paranoid, fearing that a gang was targeting him or that someone was seeking revenge. After hearing about the incident, Moise grew suspicious. She began to suspect that Wanapa might have orchestrated the attack. She warned Pickett to be cautious around his wife, but he dismissed her concerns, insisting that his wife would never do something so extreme. Although the couple occasionally argued, their relationship was still solid, and he didn't believe it could escalate to such a level. Moise decided not to push further, and the matter was left unresolved. Pickett did not report the attack to the police, reasoning that since he was unharmed, there was no need to make a big deal out of it. After the attack, Pickett began exhibiting strange behavior. He became withdrawn, often sitting alone in a daze, a stark contrast to his previously energetic demeanor. On one occasion when Mua visited him at his house, she found him sitting by himself, giggling absent-mindedly, mumbling something under his breath, and then bursting into tears. Alarmed, Mua believed that Pickett might be possessed by an evil spirit. A few days later, she took him to a Buddhist temple to perform rituals to ward off any malevolent forces. However, these efforts appeared to have no effect, and Pickett's mental state remained unstable. Suspected that Pickett's change in behavior was tied to the April 8th attack, possibly as a result of psychological trauma. When she asked him if he remembered the faces of the attackers, Pickett mentioned that the man who fired the gun bore a striking resemblance to one of his wife's friends. This detail unsettled Moise further, deepening her suspicion that there might be a hidden conspiracy behind the incident. Moise's revelations shocked the studio audience. Her words suggested that the man who attacked Pickett on the motorcycle might have known Wanapa. All eyes turned back to Wanapa, who visibly tensed up. Added that while Pickett claimed not to know the man, she herself knew his name. Just as Moi was about to disclose it, the host quickly interrupted her, urging her not to reveal such critical information to avoid interfering with the police investigation. After the program, the case took another dramatic turn, drawing even more public attention. Wanapa, who had hoped to clear her name through the program, found herself under even greater suspicion due to Moi's phone call. Following the broadcast, the police contacted Moi for further details. She told them that the attacker's name was Nathafane Sirenerang, though she had never met him personally. While she acknowledged that Pickett had been attacked prior to his death, she couldn't confirm whether the incident was connected to his demise. Moi also mentioned that Pickett had been infatuated with a woman named Sakhata who worked at a bar. Whenever he had free time, he would visit the bar to see her. Suspected that Sachata might have bewitched Pickett, leading to his mental instability and ultimately his death. The police found Moi's claims superstitious and weren't fully convinced. However, to be thorough, they questioned Sachata. She admitted to knowing Pickett from the bar, but insisted their relationship was purely platonic, describing him as a casual drinking companion. She explained that they became close because of shared interests. On the evening of April 14th, just before Pickett left for Mahasarikam, they met at the bar. According to Sakata, Pickett appeared despondent and spoke strangely, saying he didn't want to go to Mahasarikam because he felt something bad might happen there. He even told Sakata to take care of herself, as they might not see each other again. Sukta's account painted a picture of Pickett reluctantly traveling to Mahasarikam, as if sensing impending danger. This conflicted with Wanapa's claim that Pickett had missed his family, and left Bangkok to reunite with them. Was Wanapa lying? The police developed a bold theory. Wanapa may have been involved in her husband's murder. To cover her tracks, she deliberately provided chat logs showing Pickett expressing his longing for his family. While the messages suggested his genuine affection for his wife and children, it was possible that Wanapa had manipulated the conversation to deflect suspicion. The attackers in Bangkok might have been connected to her. Perhaps Wanapa harbored resentment toward Pickett for some reason and conspired with acquaintances to kill him. When the attack failed, she lured him to Mahasarikam by buying him a plane ticket. If the police could identify the two men who attacked Pickett on the motorcycle, it might confirm their hypothesis. The police retrieved surveillance footage from the restaurant in Bangkok and the route Pickett took home. On the evening of April 8th at 10:49 p.m., a camera at the restaurant entrance captured Pickett wearing a black t-shirt, shorts, and sneakers as he arrived alone. A staff member greeted him and escorted him inside. At the same time, Another camera positioned at a different angle outside the restaurant recorded two suspicious men on a motorcycle parked on the sidewalk across the street. The man sitting in the back frequently glanced at his phone, appearing to communicate with someone. Shortly after, the pair rode to a bush by the roadside where the passenger dismounted, retrieved a bag from the bush, and then rode off with the other man. At 11:22 p.m., surveillance footage from the restaurant captured Pickett leaving. 1 minute later, a gas station camera recorded two men refueling their motorcycle. 11 minutes after that, a highway surveillance camera along La Mata captured the entire attack on Pickett. The footage showed Pickett driving a black car when a motorcycle suddenly pulled up beside him. After firing 4 shots, the assailants fled the scene. Another camera at a nearby intersection recorded the two men speeding away from the scene at 11:36 p.m. The driver was wearing a helmet, while the passenger was not. The police visited Pickett's home in Bangkok, where they found the black car he had driven on the night of April 8. Upon inspecting the bullet holes on the driver's side, it became clear that the attacker's intent was to kill Pickett. However, what puzzled investigators was why the assailants, who had been seen monitoring Pickett outside the restaurant, didn't attack him there. The police suspected that the attackers might have had additional accomplices, and that their actions were carefully planned and organized, suggesting a far more complex operation than initially believed. Meanwhile, as Pickett's case continued to make headlines, the media launched their own investigations, uncovering new details. Some reporters learned that Pickett frequently used muscle-enhancing injections and took various hormone supplements to maintain his physique. Over time, these substances could have caused irreparable damage to his body. Combined with his heavy drinking habits, his health may have deteriorated, leading to sudden death. Others presented full-body photos of Pickett, showing his skin turned black, to a spiritual healer. The healer claimed that Pickett had been cursed with a deadly spell, and the blackened body was a sign of poison affecting his bones. According to the healer, the person who cast the spell could even control the timing of the victim's death. Forensic experts, however, were unable to determine the exact cause of death. The ambiguity surrounding the case led to the emergence of numerous conspiracy theories. Some even feared that they too might fall victim to similar curses. Realizing the growing hysteria, the police felt an urgent need to uncover the truth to prevent the case from spiraling further into chaos. Just as the investigation seemed to reach a deadlock, Nathafat unexpectedly brought Mew to meet the police. She explained that Mew had been close to Pickett and revealed that since his death, Mew had frequently received threatening phone calls and felt like she was being followed when she went out. The police questioned Mew for more details. She disclosed that she had recently received multiple calls from an unknown man who inquired about the progress of Pickett's case. However, whenever she asked for his identity, the man refused to answer and instead made threats. Frightened, she confided in Nathafat, who decided to involve the police. Nathafat believed the threatening calls were undoubtedly connected to Wanapa. She speculated that Wanapa, fearing the investigation's progress, might have sent someone to gather information and specifically targeted Mew. Nathafat also thought Wanapa might harbor resentment toward her due to her statements on the television program and could be seeking revenge. Although both women suspected Wanapa's involvement, they had no concrete evidence and could only rely on the police for help, requesting protection until the case was resolved. The police agreed to their request. 2 months after Pickett's death, the police arrested Wanapa on suspicion of murder. Upon her arrest, Wanapa denied all charges, accusing the police of wrongful detention. The suspect, born in 1987 in Maha, Sarakam, was 37 years old. Her father passed away when she was young, leaving her mother to raise her alone. As an adult, Wanapa moved to Bangkok to start her career, where she eventually met Pickett. The two grew close and later married, having 3 children together. Pickett's massage business flourished, and his career progressed steadily. Wanapa left her previous job to help her husband manage the business. Through their joint efforts, they were able to buy a house and a car in Bangkok, living a prosperous life. To outsiders, Wanapa seemed to have it all: a loving husband, adorable children, and a successful life. It was hard to imagine someone like her committing such a crime. In reality, the police had gathered significant evidence before arresting Wanapa. Following the leads, they tracked down the 2 men involved in the motorcycle attack that night. The men were identified as Wairapat Sikanasap, 25, who drove the motorcycle, and Nadifan Sirenarang, 25, who fired the shots. Wairapat was arrested at a rented house, and confessed to the crime in detail. He claimed he was simply hired to do a job and had no prior connection to Pickett. On April 8th, a man named Siroj called him, offering 4,000 baht to follow someone. Siroj told him that another man, Natafan, would join him to complete the task. Thinking it was a simple surveillance job, Wirepat accepted the payment. That evening, Wirepat picked up Natafan on his motorcycle, and the two waited outside the designated restaurant. While waiting, Natafan retrieved a gun from a nearby bush. At that moment, Wirepat realized this was no ordinary surveillance job. He became frightened and wanted to back out. But Natafan threatened him. Feeling forced, he reluctantly agreed to continue. After the attack, Natafan disappeared and cut off all contact with Wirepat. Using Wirepat's testimony, the police arrested Siroj, who quickly confessed. Siroj admitted he acted as a middleman, responsible for finding someone to carry out the job. He revealed that Wanapa had contacted him multiple times and paid him a total of 300,000 baht to find someone to kill her husband. The amount of money was too tempting for Siroj to refuse. After receiving the payment, he contacted Wirepat, giving him 4,000 baht to assist the gunman Natafan, who had been recruited directly by Wanapa. Siroj also handed 45,000 baht to Natafan as his share of the payment. As for the remaining money, Siroj claimed he didn't know what happened next. After her arrest, Wanapa initially denied the crime and remained silent. However, the police found evidence on her phone, including communication records with Siroj and bank transfer histories, all of which matched Siroj's testimony. Faced with this overwhelming evidence, Wanapa had no choice but to confess. She admitted that her relationship with her husband had been deteriorating for a long time. Once Pickett started earning more money, he became unfaithful, engaging in affairs with women he met at bars. Every time she confronted him, he would promise to change, but always broke his promises, leaving her deeply disappointed. Additionally, Pickett had a fiery temper and would vent his anger on her whenever he was drunk. Over time, her resentment grew, and she wanted him gone from her life. A month before the incident, Wanapa discovered that her husband was secretly involved with yet another woman. After a heated argument, she moved out with their 3 children. Determined to end his life, she began planning his murder. In late March, Wanapa contacted Natafan, the gunman, through an online platform. The two met in Bangkok on April 1st to carefully discuss the plan to kill Pickett. Wanapa then found Siroj online to assist with the plot, and Siroj subsequently recruited Wirepat. Wanapa also used various methods to acquire a gun, which she hid in a bush across from the restaurant where she had arranged to meet her husband. Her plan seemed foolproof, but Pickett narrowly escaped the assassination attempt. Fearing her husband might grow suspicious, Wanapa decided to take her children to her family's home in Maha Sarakam. To her surprise, not only did Pickett refrain from contacting the police, but he also expressed a desire to reunite with them to celebrate the Sangkran festival. Wanapa told the police that after the failed murder attempt, she felt deep regret. She claimed that she was relieved the bullets missed their target, as she would have lived in torment if her plan had succeeded. However, she was shocked when her husband suddenly died the day after returning to Maha Sarakam. The police were skeptical of her statement, suspecting that after the failed attempt, Wanapa had made a second attempt to kill Pickett. When questioned further, she admitted to hiring people to kill her husband, but refused to answer any questions about other possible actions. The police were left to continue their investigation. Natafat turned over her brother's ashes to the police, hoping forensic experts could uncover something significant. During this time, a resident of Maha Sarakam came forward with a crucial lead. The resident explained that Pickett might have ingested a toxic plant known as fish poison tree. The plant's leaves resemble the shape of a fish, and its roots have a pungent fishy odor that becomes stronger when crushed. Fishermen traditionally use the roots of this plant to poison water in rivers, making fish lethargic and easier to catch. Over time, this primitive fishing method became obsolete, and knowledge of the plant faded. While fish exposed to the poison were still edible, direct consumption of the plant itself could cause fatal poisoning, with the body turning black after death. To confirm whether Pickett had ingested the plant, forensic experts would need to conduct further tests. Meanwhile, Natafat, the gunman, remained at large following the attack, and as of now, he is still on the run. The case remains under investigation, and proving that Wanapa poisoned her husband might not be an easy task. However, it is hoped that the truth will eventually come to light. Story 3. Story takes place in San Nicolas de los Garza, a city in northeastern Mexico, located in the state of Nuevo León. It's a primarily residential city center, with a few factories on its outskirts. The main character in this story is Debin Escobar, a law student at the Autonomous University of Nuevo León. She lived with her parents on the between San Nicolas de los Garza and Apodaca. One evening in April 2022, Debini went out to a party with friends and mysteriously disappeared. According to the investigation, Debini exhibited a series of strange behaviors before her disappearance. The case has many similarities with the Elisa Lam case that occurred in the U.S. in 2013, so it has been dubbed the Mexican Elisa Lam case. Now let's turn back time to April 9th, 2022 to explore the details of the incident. That day was a Saturday, and early in the morning, local police received a distress call. The caller reported that his daughter Debeni had gone out to a party the night before, but had not returned home. She had never done this before, and her phone was currently unreachable. Worried that something might have happened to her, he requested police assistance in locating her. After receiving the report, police arrived at the family's home to gather more information. The couple explained that their daughter was a university student, and the school was less than 6 miles from their home, so she usually returned every night. Debin was born in September 2003 in Nuevo León and was 18 years old. She wasn't their biological daughter. She'd been adopted when she was just 16 months old. Both parents were experienced lawyers with a well-established law office in the area, leading a comfortable life. They adored their daughter and fulfilled nearly all her wishes. From a young age, Debin was intelligent, quick-witted, and excelled in her studies. Influenced by her parents, she was accepted into law school. Like many girls her age, Debeni enjoyed makeup, fashion, and socializing. In her free time, she often liked to attend parties with friends. Debeni's parents continued explaining to the police that around 11 p.m. the night before, a young woman had come to pick up their daughter for the party. A few hours later, they could no longer reach her by phone. At first, they thought she was just busy and didn't want to answer. However, when morning came and she still hadn't returned, with her phone still unreachable, they grew increasingly worried. They didn't know where she had gone and only knew the name of the girl who had picked her up, Sarah. Sarah, 20, was also a college student. Police quickly located her, and she explained that she had met Debeni online 3 months prior, and they had attended a few parties together, but were not close friends. The day before, Debeni texted her to invite her out, as it was a Saturday with no school the next day, and Sarah agreed. At 10:47 p.m., Sarah ordered a car to pick up Debeni from her home. After picking up Debeni, the car drove for about 10 minutes before they picked up another girl named Yvonne. Around 11:30 p.m., the three arrived in San Nicolas de los Garza, next to Apodaca. They stopped at a convenience store downtown and bought a bottle of soda, a few disposable cups, and ice. Afterward, they walked to a friend's house on Simón Bolívar Street, where a party was underway. They drank, played games, and had a great time in the lively atmosphere. At 12:49 a.m., Debini suddenly announced that she wanted to leave, saying the party was getting a bit boring and she wanted to go somewhere else to keep the fun going. Sarah thought this was a bit odd, but since Debini was insistent, she and Yvonne decided to go along with her. They walked to another party nearby, but were turned away. Left with no other options, they began searching for another spot. Sarah then booked a white Kia through a ride-hailing app at 1 a.m. They got in and headed to the town of General Escobedo, about 4 miles from San Nicolas de los Garza, where a house party was in progress. Let's call this house one. Before they got out, Sarah asked for the driver's phone number so she could call him when they needed a ride back. When they arrived, they discovered that the party had already ended. A group nearby mentioned that there was another party close by, which we'll refer to as House 2. After checking, they found that the host of the party at House 2 was not allowing strangers to join. Still, Sarah, Debeni, and Yvonne decided to try their luck and headed there with the group who had shown them the way. The two houses were very close, less than 330 feet apart. Upon arrival, the host initially refused them entry, but after some persuasion, he eventually agreed. At first, everything seemed normal as they enjoyed the party. However, not long after, Debeni began acting strangely. She started shouting and running back and forth around the pool, drawing attention from the other guests. Sarah and Yvonne, thinking she was drunk, tried to calm her down, but Debeni wouldn't listen and even locked herself in the men's bathroom. After much coaxing, Debeni reluctantly opened the bathroom door and came out, visibly upset. But shortly after, she went back and began yelling again, causing annoyance among the other guests. Embarrassed, Sarah tried to pull Debeni away from the party. Unexpectedly, Debeni became even more agitated, ran outside, started shouting profanities, and even kicked at Sarah, who was attempting to comfort her. At 3:29 a.m., Sarah contacted the previous driver to pick them up. Once Debeni got in the car, Sarah asked the driver to take her home safely, while Sarah and Yvonne called another car to take them home. Initially, Sarah thought everything was settled, but later, the driver messaged her saying that Debeni had started screaming wildly in the car, and even tried to open the door to jump out. Left with no other option, the driver pulled over and forced Debeni out of the vehicle. Sarah pleaded with the driver not to leave Debeni alone on the street, but the driver stated that Debeni had refused his help, leaving him with no choice. Sarah then tried to find contact information for Debeni's family through her social media accounts, but had no success. She began reassuring herself, thinking that after getting out of the car, Debeni would surely call another ride to get home. However, in reality, Debeni did not return home that night, and no one knew where she had gone. Sarah's statement was corroborated by Yvonne. Yvonne told the police that she had not known Debeni before, and had only met her at the party that night, so she didn't know much about her. However, she felt that Debeni had a volatile temperament and became quite agitated after drinking, refusing to listen to anyone's advice. Based on the information provided by the two women, police reviewed surveillance cameras along the route they took to the parties. At 11:30 p.m. on Friday, surveillance footage showed the three of them buying items at a convenience store in San Nicolas de los Garza, with Debeni being the one who paid. Simone Bolivar Street, where the first party was held, did not have surveillance cameras, so there was no footage of them there. However, police were able to retrieve footage from an outside House 2 in General Escobedo. The surveillance footage showed that at 1:20 a.m. on Saturday, the three approached House 2 by car. After getting out, they walked briefly to House 1, then returned to House 2 with a group of other people. 9 minutes later, Debeni stepped out of House 2 alone and disappeared from the camera's view. Four men then walked in the direction where Debeni had gone, frequently looking back toward where she had exited. Later, Debeni returned to House 2, and the four men stood in place for quite some time before eventually leaving. It could be assumed that they were drawn to Debeni's attractive appearance, and attempted to approach her, but had no opportunity. Over an hour later, at 2:45 a.m., Debeni appeared again in the camera's view, with a man in a white shirt following her. This man quickly moved in front of Debeni, blocking her path. Debeni stepped toward the edge of the road, and the man followed closely behind. The footage shows that Debeni appeared very irritated, repeatedly pushing the man with her hands, trying to escape his persistence. However, he continued to follow her. Debeni turned around and kicked him. At that moment, two passers-by saw the argument and intervened. Eventually, more people gathered to separate them, including Sarah and Yvonne. At 3:54 a.m., Debeni got into a white Kia. Sarah leaned down to speak with the driver, then the car drove off and the crowd dispersed. The camera footage matched Sarah's account exactly. Police also reviewed the chat history between Sarah and the driver, confirming her statement as truthful. The police located the driver, a 46-year-old named Juan, to obtain his statement. One reported that around 4 a.m. that day, Debeni got into his car, appearing intoxicated and agitated. She continuously shouted and demanded to get out to return to where she had been. Feeling helpless, Juan stopped the car and patiently tried to talk to Debeni for a few minutes, hoping she would calm down. However, Debeni wouldn't listen at all. Considering it unsafe to leave a young woman alone on the street, Juan continued driving. Juan then suggested that Debeni call her family, but she said her phone battery was dead. Seeing this, Juan offered her a charger from his car, but she shouted that she didn't need it. However, shortly after, Debeni suddenly climbed from the back seat to the front, grabbed the charger, and plugged it into her phone. She attempted to power it on, but with the battery too low, she tried multiple times without success. She became agitated again, saying she didn't want to go home, and demanded Juan take her to another party. Determined to take her home, Juan asked for her address, but she refused to answer, and even tried to jump out of the car. Feeling helpless, Juan contacted Sarah after learning her address. Juan continued driving, but unexpectedly, Debeni became restless in the car and insisted on getting out. Fearing she might act dangerously, Juan pulled over. After Debeni exited the car, Juan contacted Sarah again, and took a photo of Dabini standing on the road. Juan attempted to persuade Dabini to get back in the car, but she ignored him. Seeing no other option, and not wanting to encounter further issues, Juan drove off. In the photo, Dabini has her hair down, is wearing a black face mask, black canvas shoes, and a black shoulder bag. Next, the police retrieved surveillance footage from around the area where Dabini exited the car. The surveillance camera from an international trucking company across the street captured footage at 4:28 a.m. on April 9th. After getting out of the car, Dabini wandered alone in the middle of the road, with cars occasionally speeding past her, which was very dangerous. After wandering for a while, she began slowly crossing the street, moving toward the trucking company. She approached the company's security office, peered inside as if she wanted to enter, and then disappeared from the camera's view. Since the surveillance footage did not capture any images of driver Juan, he was temporarily excluded as a suspect. The police reviewed the footage multiple times and suspected that Dabini might have seen something while passing the trucking company, or may have intended to enter the company seeking help. In summary, the police believed that Dabini's disappearance might be connected to the trucking company, so they went to the company to speak with the person in charge. After reviewing the surveillance footage, this individual stated that he didn't know Dabini and that nothing unusual had happened at the company that day. According to the timestamp on the camera, there was no one on duty in the security room at that time, so it was unclear why Dabini looked toward the security room. Police speculated that Dabini might have wanted to enter the security room for help, but seeing no one there, she left to find assistance elsewhere. With permission, the police interviewed employees working at the transport company. One employee provided them with an important lead, mentioning an abandoned restaurant not far from the company, where Dabini might have gone. Surveillance footage indicated that Dabini's direction of movement aligned with the path toward this nearby restaurant. Behind the restaurant was also a motel, where it was possible Dabini had ventured. The police then went to the motel to investigate. The motel owner reported never having seen Dabini, and the guests staying that day also hadn't noticed her. A motel employee mentioned that the neighboring restaurant had been abandoned recently, so the surveillance equipment inside might still be operational. The police discovered that the surveillance system in the abandoned restaurant was still functional, so they reviewed the footage from that day and uncovered some findings. The restaurant was cylindrical in shape, with an interior camera directed straight out the window. Street lights illuminated a clear image of Dabini walking past at 4:35 a.m. that morning, sprinting past a small window. Footage from the motel entrance showed that at 4:35 a.m., Dabini ran toward the restaurant in a panic, as if someone was chasing her. However, upon closer examination, it appeared that no one was actually following her. This behavior from Dabini was quite strange. 1 minute later, Dabini appeared in the restaurant's camera frame. Initially, she looked inside, and upon seeing no one, she quickly ran off. She then moved out of the camera's view. Based on the direction in which she was running, it is presumed that she circled around the restaurant. After realizing she couldn't enter, Dabini left. 20 minutes later, Dabini appeared again in the restaurant's surveillance footage, heading toward the side of the building. From that point on, she did not appear on any other cameras. Police suspect that something may have happened to Dabini after 4:56 a.m. on April 9th. They went to the location where she was last seen, along the side of the restaurant to investigate. There was a high wall with an abandoned swimming pool inside. Below a different section of the wall, there were 3 storm drain openings lined up in a row. The first 2 drains had no covers, while the third one was covered. Could it be possible that Dabini climbed over the wall to enter? This hypothesis was quickly dismissed. After taking measurements, the wall was found to be 8.5 feet high with barbed wire at the top. Dabini, who stood at 5 feet 5 inches, would have had no footholds on the wall, making it nearly impossible for her to climb over alone. On the second day following the incident, police expanded their search area, using drones and search dogs, but still found nothing. News of Dabini's mysterious disappearance spread online, capturing the attention of more and more people. There was growing unease, as Dabini was not the first woman to go missing in the area. The road where Dabini exited the car was known by locals as the Death Road, with over 20 women reported missing near the stretch. Some suspected that this could be connected to local criminal gangs familiar with the terrain, and who often targeted young women traveling alone. Following the incident, Dabini's parents actively cooperated with the police investigation, urging family and friends to help search in the area where she went missing. They printed numerous flyers and posters to distribute to passers-by, and some volunteers also joined in the search effort. Amidst the ongoing search, a senior Mexican government official made a statement suggesting that the missing girls were responsible for their own troubles by being disobedient, going out alone at night, and generally being reckless. This statement sparked immediate outrage, with citizens criticizing the official for his cold and insensitive remarks. 6 days after the incident, police announced a reward of 100,000 Mexican pesos, or close to $5,000 US, for anyone providing useful information. They also deployed over 200 officers to conduct extensive searches at the nearby restaurant and motel. On April 21st, 12 days after Debony's disappearance at 10 p.m., a motel employee mentioned to the owner that he had frequently noticed a strange odor recently, which seemed to be coming from the water tanks next to the restaurant. Hearing this, the motel owner immediately sensed something was wrong and notified the police. The police quickly arrived on the scene. They confirmed that the foul odor was indeed coming from the 3 water tanks near the wall. Upon inspection, they discovered a body in the first uncovered tank. The tank's opening measured 38.5 inches in length, 35.5 inches in width, and had a depth of approximately 14.5 feet. At the time, the water level in the tank was low, around 3 feet. The 3 water tanks were interconnected at a depth of about 6.5 to 10 feet, with the space widening toward the bottom, reaching a maximum width of about 6 feet. When Debony was found, she was positioned head down with her feet in the air. It took the police a considerable amount of time to retrieve the body from the tank. Due to prolonged submersion in water, the body was severely bloated. However, the police were able to identify the victim as Debony, an 18-year-old who had been missing for over 10 days, based on her clothing and the crucifix necklace around her neck. In the water tank, they also found a pair of black canvas shoes and a shoulder bag containing a black face mask, a red plastic container, a bra, and 2 beige jackets. In the second uncovered water tank next to it, police recovered an orange lighter, a keychain, a black cell phone, a wallet, and a plastic container. The following day, the police released part of the forensic report. DNA analysis confirmed that the victim was indeed Debony. The cause of death was determined to be head trauma, with the estimated time of death between April 8th and April 9th. The police did not release further details, suggesting that Debony had been intoxicated in the early morning and, while disoriented, may have fallen into the water tank, striking her head. The case was initially classified as an accident. However, Debony's parents could not accept this conclusion. They argued that the police had not disclosed the full forensic report and may have withheld important details. Since Debony's disappearance, the police had searched the area around the restaurant multiple times, even using drones and search dogs, yet failed to locate her body, which was right nearby. This seemed unbelievable. The police's swift conclusion that her death was accidental led many to believe they had handled the case carelessly, simply putting on a show for the media, rather than conducting a serious investigation. Public outrage grew in response to the police's apparent negligence. People rallied in support of Debony's parents, calling for a thorough investigation. Under public pressure, 2 days later, the case was reopened as a potential homicide investigation. The investigation was handed over to the prosecutor's office, specializing in crimes against women. Debony's parents also requested a second autopsy, believing that their daughter had been murdered and her body disposed of in the water tank. They were determined to bring the perpetrator to justice. 17 days after the incident, a surveillance video unexpectedly leaked online. Filmed from a different angle outside House 2, possibly by a nearby resident, the video showed Juan's car parked on the roadside near the house at 4:17 a.m. In the footage, Debony was sitting in the passenger seat, and the two appeared to be talking. Debony was gesturing with her hands, signaling something. After a moment, Juan reached toward Debony's chest before pulling his hand back. Debony then became visibly agitated, making hand gestures, and repeatedly pushing Juan away. It appeared as though she was questioning him about something, while Juan slumped forward onto the steering wheel, remaining still. The video release once again stirred public outrage. Debony's parents, after viewing the footage, stated that their daughter was typically calm and had never lost control so suddenly. Her mother said, "One reached toward my daughter's chest." They added, "We suspect that one saw Debony was drunk and attempted to take advantage of her. After being rejected, he may have become angry and decided to kill her." Although previous surveillance footage showed that one was not at the scene where Debony's body was found, this does not rule out the possibility that he returned to commit the crime. One frequented that area, was familiar with the locations of surveillance cameras, and could have easily avoided them. According to the investigation, Juan was not a straightforward character. Not long before Debony's disappearance, he had been arrested for drug possession. Additionally, he had a history of harassing women and was a regular at the police station. With such a background, he was certainly capable of committing murder. A day after the video leak, Juan responded to a media interview. He printed out his entire chat history with Sarah from that day to show the public and detailed the sequence of events. Stated he had never harassed women, calling those rumors baseless, saying he was not that kind of person. In the video, it appears that my hand was touching Debony's chest, but I had no improper intentions. I was merely handing her a phone charger. The video angle made it look as though I was behaving inappropriately. One explained that in the early hours when Debony got into the car, she was in very poor condition, speaking incoherently, and appeared to have been drugged. She kept complaining to him about her friends, saying that the girls who went to the party with her were all fake. She became increasingly agitated, making hand gestures continuously. Debony then insisted on getting out of the car midway, and though he tried to convince her otherwise, he eventually had to let her out. He stated that he never expected she would lose her life. One expressed deep frustration over the online comments, with people assuming he was a murderer, when he was completely innocent. He decided to come forward to clear his name. A month after the incident, Debony's ID card was discovered by a resident at Building 15, about 10 miles from the crime scene. The resident said he found the ID in a flower bed while walking his dog in the morning. Due to the widespread media coverage of Debony's case, he immediately recognized the person in the photo. It's likely the perpetrator discarded the ID here after the crime. However, at this point, it was challenging to gather any additional leads. In the town of General Escobedo, 15 more surveillance videos related to Debony surfaced, one of which particularly caught her parents' attention. This video was recorded from the motel behind the abandoned restaurant. While it seemed to be showcasing the motel's facilities, one scene oddly focused directly on room 174, as if hinting at something. Police conducted another search of the motel, a process that lasted 7 hours. They extracted additional surveillance footage and used forensic lighting in room 174, but found nothing unusual. Debony's parents then requested the police to search the trucking company next door again. This time, they discovered that one surveillance camera at the company had missing footage for a span of 8 to 9 minutes. Debony's parents speculated that the missing footage could be crucial to understanding their daughter's death. However, the police provided no explanation for this gap, and the matter gradually faded from public attention. On May 13th, the second forensic report was released. It noted multiple injuries on Debony's body, including blunt force trauma to her head, bruises on her forehead, eyes, nose, left lip, and around her ears. She had been assaulted before her death. Her respiratory tract and lungs showed no signs of water, indicating that she had died before falling into the water tank. This report immediately reignited public outrage, as many felt that the police had concealed the truth, acted irresponsibly, and tried to hastily close the case. Hundreds of local women took to the streets in protest. Soon, the anger spread to other cities across Mexico, drawing widespread support. This wave of protests drew attention to the pervasive issue of missing women in Mexico. Each year, thousands of women go missing under mysterious circumstances in Mexico, with Debony being just one of many. People grieved for Debony, with many visiting the crime scene to lay flowers, light candles, and wear purple ribbons in her memory. The President of Mexico extended his deepest condolences to Debony's parents, pledging to fully investigate the matter and ensure justice for the young woman. On June 16th, in a morning press conference, the Mexican president announced that a third autopsy would be conducted on Debony, with multiple forensic experts involved. On June 30th, Debony's body, which had been buried, was exhumed for further investigation. The results of the third autopsy were announced shortly after. Debony was found to have died from asphyxiation due to multiple obstructions to her airway, with no signs of assault or abuse prior to death. This latest conclusion contradicted the findings of the second autopsy. The new report suggested that Debony accidentally fell into the water tank and drowned. With no further leads, Debony's parents believed that the two girls who were with their daughter that night, Sarah and Yvonne, bore some responsibility. Later, Sarah and Yvonne appeared together in a televised interview, where they shared the significant psychological toll they had faced since Debony's death. They stated that they had been heavily criticized for abandoning their friend, and some people had even cursed and harassed them on social media, seriously affecting their lives. That night, we offered help to Debony multiple times, but she refused, they said. We did our best to help her. No one wanted this to happen. We never expected things to turn out so badly. Otherwise, we would have made sure she got home. We are truly sorry to Debony's parents, but this was all we could do. On Debony's birthday in 2023, her father posted on social media, "Today, heaven and the angels are celebrating because our little princess would have turned 20. Now she is surrounded by angels and stars, becoming the family's guardian angel. Every time you play among the rainbows, we can hear your voice. We love you so much, Debony." This case became one of the most publicized criminal cases in Mexico's history. To this day, there is still no conclusive answer as to whether Debony's death was an accident or homicide. Public opinion remains divided, with each person holding their own beliefs. The case has become an unsolved mystery, and Debony's parents continue to struggle with the grief of losing their daughter, relentlessly searching for the truth. However, the truth may forever remain hidden in darkness. The case of Debony Escobar, along with the hundreds of other missing women cases in Mexico, remains an open wound, a painful call for justice and truth. Whatever the final conclusion, the image of a vibrant young woman, forever 18, lost on an empty road, continues to haunt the minds of Mexicans. Debony's story has become a symbol of the fear and uncertainty that countless women in Mexico face, a haunting reminder of the reality of gender-based violence, the negligence of authorities, and a society still plagued with injustice and unresolved issues that must be confronted. While Debony cannot be brought back, her family, friends, and supporters continue to carry the torch of hope, persisting in their journey to seek justice for the young woman. They believe that only when the guilty are held accountable, and when Mexico's roads of death are no more, will Debony and countless other unfortunate victims truly find peace. Story 4. This story unfolds in Pakistan, a predominantly Muslim country in South Asia, specifically in the capital city, Islamabad. Our main character, Noor McAdam, was a talented 27-year-old woman born on October 31st, 1993, in Amman, Jordan. She was the second of 3 children in her family. Both of her parents held distinguished statuses. Her father, Kakut McAdam, was a prominent Pakistani diplomat, having served as Pakistan's ambassador to South Korea and Ireland. Her mother also came from a powerful family. Due to her father's work, Noor spent a significant part of her childhood in Ireland, which shaped her upbringing. She received a quality education from a young age, with her parents being highly educated and open-minded in raising their children. They fully supported her interests. In such a family, Noor grew up as a kind-hearted young woman with a love for animals and art. She harbored a grand dream of making the world a better place. Although many might see this as an idealistic dream, Noor took it seriously, wholeheartedly engaging with people and the world around her, hoping to bring about gradual change. Later, her father's job required the family to return to Pakistan, settling in Islamabad. Despite leaving the familiar environment of Ireland, Noor adapted well, quickly falling in love with her new surroundings. Career-wise, she planned to design clothing and create murals, excelling in this field and producing many stunning works. Because her parents were part of Pakistan's upper class, Noor was acquainted with many wealthy families, including Zahir Jaffer. The two families had known each other for years through their parents' connections. Zahir, now 30, was the son of Shakir Jaffer, an immensely wealthy businessman in Pakistan. His family held vast wealth and influence, with a family business established by his ancestors long before Pakistan was founded, spanning industries like oil, railroads, aviation, and pharmaceuticals. His mother, Asmat Adamji, also came from one of Pakistan's wealthiest families, ranking among the top 40 in the country. Zahir's parents indulged him, letting him do whatever he pleased. As a result, he lived a life of luxury, almost like royalty. Large, influential families typically prioritize the education of their heirs, as they are expected to carry on the family's enormous legacy. Zahir received a quality education, attending prestigious schools in Pakistan like Beacon House and LUMS before studying business management and psychology in the United States. He held dual citizenship in Pakistan and the U.S. Unlike the conservative norms in Pakistan, he preferred the openness of Western society, so he often spent time in the US and the UK, frequenting bars and entertainment venues. In 2018, Zahir happened to meet Noor. He was a successful young man, and was an enthusiastic and lively young woman. He came from a powerful family, and she was the daughter of a diplomat. Friends remarked that they were a perfect match, practically made for each other. After getting to know each other, they officially started dating, though marriage was not yet on the table. Their relationship drew admiration and envy from those around them. On the evening of July 18, 2021, Zahir invited Noor to his villa on F7 Street in Islamabad. This neighborhood was a hallmark of extreme wealth, home to the elite. Since they were in a relationship, an invitation like this was nothing out of the ordinary, especially since she had visited his home several times before. She expected a typical evening, looking forward to the gathering. Little did she know, this would be a one-way trip, a journey of no return, and this villa would mark the end of her life. Time passed, and by the early hours of July 20th, 2021, Noor had been out of contact with her family for an entire day. Her father, Kakit, had spent the day shopping for the upcoming holiday and only noticed her absence when he returned home in the evening. At 12:47 a.m., he sent her 3 text messages, asking where she was, but received no response. At 5:48 a.m., her mother texted her as well, but still received no reply. During that time, 2 relatives tried calling her, but her phone was turned off. With each hour, her parents' worry grew. Finally, at 10:43 a.m., her mother received a voice message from Noor, assuring them she was safe. The exact content of the message was never disclosed. Relieved, her parents' anxiety eased. But in a strange twist, Zahir called around the same time, claiming that Noor wasn't at his place and that he didn't know where she was. It felt like someone confessing to not stealing money before even being asked about it. Although it seemed odd, since Noor had reassured them of her safety, her parents dismissed any concerns. Just a few hours later, Mr. Kakit, Noor's father, received a call from the police informing him that his daughter had been murdered. This news devastated her parents, but they had to hold back their grief to identify her body. Learning that the crime scene was Zahir's home shocked them even more. When they arrived at the villa, they found blood covering the room, with Noor, just 27 years old, lying in a pool of red. The horrifying detail was that her head was nearly severed. A preliminary examination revealed she had been brutally tortured before her death, with multiple stab wounds and injuries from a blunt object. A forensic report later showed Noor had been assaulted multiple times, and the cause of death was asphyxiation, meaning the killer continued to dismember her after she was already dead. Blood stains at the scene suggested her head had been struck. The crime scene was Zahir's home, and the police found weapons, a knife and a club, on his person. Zahir was clearly the prime suspect, and was immediately taken into custody. Strikingly, there were several others in the room at the time, including employees from a healthcare company. It remains unclear why they were present. One of them might have been the person who reported the murder to the police, though they didn't reveal their identity, possibly to avoid unwanted complications or for fear of retaliation. To this day, the caller's identity remains a mystery. The police were under immense pressure, fully aware that this case would be exceptionally difficult to handle. Both the victim and the suspect came from influential backgrounds, but there was no turning back. What happened had happened. Given that Zahir held U.S. citizenship, frequently traveled between the U.S. and the U.K., and reportedly had a criminal record in both countries, having even been deported from the U.K., the investigators sought assistance from the U.K. and U.S. authorities, hoping they could provide his criminal history. Zahir had a history of violence and substance abuse, and had even been arrested for assaulting his own mother. As the investigation deepened, it was discovered that Zahir's parents were also implicated as accomplices. The healthcare staff present were associated with his father's company, having been sent by him. Call records and statements from the healthcare staff revealed that Zahir called his parents for help after killing Noor. His father then sent people to the scene to try to destroy evidence and stage the scene. Fortunately, before they could carry out their plan, someone alerted the police, which led to the case being uncovered. On July 25, 2021, the police arrested Zahir's parents along with some household staff, sealed the healthcare company, and denied bail. It's worth noting that the police acted with remarkable efficiency and decisiveness, largely due to the massive public outrage. Given the influence of former Ambassador Showkat, both online and in real life, many people pressured the police to act swiftly and deliver justice. After investigating the scene and reviewing the surveillance footage around the house, the police uncovered shocking details. They reconstructed the sequence of events as follows. On the night of July 18th, Zahir unexpectedly called Noor, asking her to come to his house. Noor arrived at 10:19 p.m., unaware that Zahir had already booked 2 plane tickets to New York for 3:50 a.m. on July 19th. He planned to propose to Noor that evening, hoping they would leave for New York together if she accepted. However, Noor was not yet ready for marriage. Although they had been dating for 3 years, she ultimately turned down Zahir's proposal. In Pakistan, refusing a proposal can be seen as highly disrespectful, and Zahir, a proud man, felt humiliated and became enraged, leading to an argument between them. At around 2:15 a.m. on July 19th, Zahir dragged Noor, who was barefoot, out of the house and hailed a taxi to the airport. However, halfway there, he realized they wouldn't make the flight in time, so they returned home. The taxi driver later reported that the two appeared to have argued. The woman was silent with a tense expression, while the man was yelling constantly. Shortly after they returned home, Noor tried to leave again. At 2:41 a.m., she made it to the yard but was chased down by Zahir, who pulled her back inside. At 7:12 a.m. on July 20th, Noor attempted to escape by jumping from an upper floor. She ran barefoot, clutching her abdomen toward the main gate, only to be stopped by the security guard and gardener. Shortly after, Zahir noticed something was wrong, jumped down, seized Noor's phone, and locked her in the security room. Minutes later, Zahir, in a rage, dragged Noor back into the house from the security room. Surveillance footage captured no further images of Noor after that. The next time she was seen was when her body was discovered. It was clear that this house was the primary crime scene. Interestingly, on November 14, 2021, Pakistan's Electronic Media Regulatory Authority banned all satellite channels from broadcasting the leaked surveillance footage. Police believe that after Noor's repeated escape attempts failed, Zahir tortured her brutally, a process that lasted the entire day and ultimately ended in her death. Upon his arrest, Zahir pleaded not guilty. However, the case was filled with clear evidence, leaving little room for him to avoid conviction. DNA tests revealed Zahir's semen in Noor's body, Zahir's skin cells under her fingernails, and Noor's blood on the shirt Zahir wore at the time. Both the blade and handle of the murder weapon contained Noor's blood, and the knife was confirmed to belong to Zahir. Noor's blood was also found on a club, which likewise belonged to Zahir. Zahir was the only person with Noor from start to finish, making him the sole suspect. On Zahir's phone, the police found a video of him torturing Noor. Although it had been deleted, the police were eventually able to recover it. All these pieces of evidence point directly to Zahir as the perpetrator. Of course, Zahir was not the only one involved in the crime. On October 14th, the Islamabad court indicted 12 suspects, including Zahir, his parents, 3 household staff members, and 6 employees from the healthcare company. The security guard and gardener were charged with failing to help a person in distress, preventing Noor's escape, and indirectly contributing to her death. The others were charged with withholding information, attempting to destroy evidence, and staging the crime scene. This case drew widespread attention across Pakistan. People were following every development to see the outcome of this trial between 2 powerful families. Many singers, actors, journalists, and other public figures took to social media, all using the hashtag Justice for Noor. Beyond online support, numerous memorials were held in Noor's honor, not only in her hometown, but also in cities like Berlin, Los Angeles, New York, London, Toronto, and many others. Although Noor had an outpouring of support, her parents knew that facing a wealthy and powerful family in court would be challenging, with unpredictable obstacles. This proved true. Even during the pre-trial detention phase, tensions between the 2 families were high. Zahir's family hired a team of high-profile lawyers who used every tactic in the book, leveraging every relevant law to delay the trial and reduce the charges. Zahir himself, the perpetrator, was no less devious. On his way to court, he displayed arrogance, taunting others with remarks like, "It's ridiculous that they arrested me. I'm an American, not a Pakistani. My lawyer will explain everything to you." In addition to his brazen attitude, he fabricated numerous stories throughout the 25 hearings, attempting to mislead the judge. He claimed Noor had many boyfriends, one of whom killed her. Other times, he claimed Noor brought a large amount of drugs to his house, demanding he host a party. He said he refused and went upstairs to sleep, and when he woke up, he found himself tied up, with Noor supposedly murdered by someone else at the wild party, of which he claimed to know nothing. At other times, he said he proposed to Noor but killed her in a struggle after she refused. In short, none of his testimonies were truthful. To lessen his sentence, Zahir resorted to various ploys. He frequently appeared in court carried in on a stretcher or seated in a wheelchair, and he was even removed from the courtroom multiple times due to disruptive behavior. At one point, he pointed at the judge and yelled insults, then pretended to suffer from a mental illness, acting and speaking incoherently. The prosecution was often frustrated by Zahir's bizarre behavior, but continued to counter each claim. When he claimed to have a mental illness, they brought in a psychiatrist to examine him. When he claimed to be too sick to attend court, they arranged for a medical specialist along with a caregiver to transport him on a stretcher to the courtroom. Finally, when he ran out of excuses, Zahir shouted, "I'm an American. Pakistan has no right to judge me. I demand to be tried in the United States." It's true that Zahir was an American citizen, and the U.S. Embassy in Pakistan even sent representatives to visit him in jail. However, the U.S. made it clear that American citizens abroad must abide by the laws of the country they are in. When Americans are arrested overseas, the embassy can check on their welfare and provide legal aid contacts, but it cannot offer legal advice, participate in court proceedings, or secure their release. Pakistan's Prime Minister at the time, Imran Khan, publicly stated that the perpetrator would be severely punished regardless of foreign citizenship. The Pakistani government even flagged Zahir's name at border checkpoints to prevent him from fleeing the country. On February 24, 2022, after 8 months of trials and lengthy legal battles, the Islamabad court delivered its final verdict. Zahir was convicted of Noor's murder and sentenced to death. Yes, Pakistan does have the death penalty. Additionally, he received a 25-year prison sentence and was fined 200,000 Pakistani rupees for assault, 15 years in prison with a 100,000 rupee fine for abduction, and 1 year in prison for illegal detention. Altogether, he was fined 300,000 Pakistani rupees, roughly $1,100 at the current exchange rate. Zahir's 2 household staff members, the security guard and the gardener, were each sentenced to 15 years in prison. As for Zahir's parents and the others prosecuted for failing to report the crime and attempting to cover it up, they were ultimately acquitted. Noor's father expressed relief at the verdict. Speaking to the media outside the court, he said, "I am pleased that justice has been served. The law is indeed fair." However, he voiced concerns about the acquittal of the other parties and later filed an appeal arguing that they should also be held accountable. After review, the court upheld the acquittals. Zahir, sentenced to death, and the 2 employees sentenced to 15 years also appealed to the Islamabad High Court for sentence reductions. Upon review, the High Court upheld the sentences, even increasing Zahir's penalty by adding a second death sentence for assault, bringing his total to 2 death sentences. Noor's father commented, "This outcome proves to everyone that no one stands above the law." Although Zahir was sentenced to death, carrying out the execution posed its own challenges. On April 12, 2023, Zahir appealed to Pakistan's Supreme Court, citing 23 reasons, arguing that the sentence was unfair. However, the Supreme Court dismissed his appeal. Following the widespread media coverage, this case became a national issue in Pakistan, and the government was under considerable pressure not to neglect it. Understanding this, the Jafar family's spokesperson immediately released a statement distancing themselves from Zahir. The Jafar family extends its deepest condolences to Noor's family and loved ones. "We are horrified and deeply saddened by these heinous actions. We deeply regret this incident. Furthermore, we strongly condemn this violent act and will forever denounce Zahir and his behavior." Zahir's maternal family also issued a clear statement. "Our family strongly condemns Zahir's brutal actions. We do not and will never support Zahir in any way. We firmly stand by the rule of law. Justice for Noor must be served and will be served." Zahir's parents also issued a statement through their lawyer. "We firmly stand with thee and will absolutely not protect this son." Thus, Zahir has been disowned by those around him, and the only path awaiting him is the death sentence, although the exact date of execution remains unknown. Since he has denied guilt from the beginning, his motive for the crime remains unclear. Perhaps one day he will feel remorse and confess, or he may die without repenting, leaving the motive a mystery forever. Noor's tragic death was like a spark that ignited an explosive issue, bringing violence against women in Pakistan to a breaking point. In fact, gender inequality in Pakistan is severe and women face low status in many aspects, such as education, employment, and even within their families. According to the Global Gender Gap Index 2021, Pakistan ranked 153rd out of 156 countries, fourth from the bottom. In 2022, it worsened, ranking 145th out of 146 countries. Some may have heard the term honor killing, where family, tribe, or community members murder others to preserve what they consider the family's honor or reputation. Globally, there are as many as 5,000 honor killings per year. One well-known case involved Kandal Baloch, a 26-year-old social media personality, known as the Kim Kardashian of Pakistan, who was brutally murdered by her brother for posting provocative photos online. Shockingly, after his arrest, her brother showed no remorse, believing that protecting the family's honor was an honorable and proud act. In recent years, Pakistan has made efforts to pass new laws to protect women and establish special courts for gender-based violence cases, but the challenges remain immense. Just a month before Noor's murder, Pakistani Prime Minister Imran Khan made a shocking statement. If women dress provocatively, men will be aroused unless they are robots. He implied that the rise in cases involving women was primarily due to their revealing clothing. This statement sparked nationwide protests at the time. And before those protests settled, Noor's murder took place. The issue of women's safety in Pakistan is urgent. According to many Pakistani women, seeking justice for Noor is just the first step forward, but there is still a long road ahead. When gender becomes the reason for bullying and discrimination, when the powerful can act with impunity, when money can manipulate justice and decide life and death, true safety and freedom are out of reach for everyone. In response to the public outcry, the Pakistani government finally recognized the gravity of the problem and began to focus on similar cases. Story 5. On a fateful night in a quiet corner of New York City, heart-wrenching screams pierced the darkness. The victims, innocent children, fell one by one to brutal knife attacks. They were too young to understand why they had to suffer such a cruel fate, and even more incomprehensible was why the perpetrator was someone they lovingly called Uncle Nyen Dong. This tragedy begins with the story of Zhu Yilan, a man born and raised in Lianchuan Village, Chonglei District, Fuzhou City, Fujian Province, China. Fate had not been kind to him from an early age. His father died in a workplace accident when he was just 12, leaving his mother, Chen Yijia, to raise him alone. In the 1980s, when China implemented its reform and opening up policy, a wave of people from coastal provinces like Guangdong and Fujian sought opportunities abroad. Many succeeded, finding good jobs and sending money home to help their families escape poverty. Witnessing the transformation of families with relatives working abroad, the residents of Lincowan Village began their own exodus. They believed it was the quickest path out of poverty. However, lacking legal documentation, many chose the risky and dangerous path of illegal immigration. Even while still in school, Yilan had decided to follow this path. At age 21, with $40,000 borrowed from relatives and friends, Yilan pursued his American dream like many other young men from his village. After an arduous journey filled with challenges, he finally reached the bustling streets of New York City. Though the city was foreign to him, it held the promise of opportunities and hoped for a brighter future. By this time, Chinese cuisine in America had developed extensively, offering diverse options from Guangdong, Sichuan, braised dishes and specialties from Dongbei and Xinjiang. Chinese restaurants had spread beyond major cities to small towns, train stations, bus terminals, and tourist destinations. Like many immigrants, language barriers and lack of professional skills limited Yilan to demanding manual labor jobs with modest wages. After searching, he found work at a Chinese restaurant, starting with the most basic tasks. His life mirrored that of his fellow immigrants, cramped in tiny rooms, sleeping in bunk beds with barely enough headroom. After painfully hitting his head numerous times when sitting up, he learned to adapt, never sitting fully upright. Life gradually improved over time. Steady income allowed him to upgrade to an upper bunk, and eventually his own bed. Finally, he could sit up straight without fear of hitting his head. After paying off his debts, like many immigrants, he set his sights on a higher goal, obtaining a green card. In the eyes of many, only with this document in hand could they truly consider themselves successful in America. After more than 15 years of hard work, Yilan finally achieved this milestone. He had become someone with status in the eyes of others. However, approaching 30 and still single, his mother back home couldn't help but worry about his happiness. She actively searched for a suitable match for her son. Through matchmaking, he met and fell in love with Li Xiaojin, a beautiful girl from his home province of Fujian. With the help of human traffickers, Xiaojin soon made her way to New York to reunite with her love. They quickly married, and not long after, Xiaojin was fortunate enough to receive her green card, officially beginning her new life in America. After marriage, Yellen and Xiaojun moved to Brooklyn, New York. They rented an apartment at 870 57th Street, 8th Avenue Sunset Park. Their apartment was on the first floor, with 2 bedrooms and 1 bathroom. Though not spacious, it was in a convenient location. To save money, Yellen lived an extremely frugal and simple life. He not only didn't smoke, but also refused to spend money on entertainment. Despite being invited many times by the restaurant owner, after 12 hours of exhausting work, he only wanted to return to his dormitory, relaxing by watching TV or talking on the phone with his wife and children. With a modest salary of $3,000 per month, he had to be strict with his spending, never indulging in any luxuries for himself. However, despite living so frugally, Yilon was always generous with friends and family. He didn't hesitate to help a fellow villager pay off the enormous debt they had incurred to immigrate to America. During holidays and festivals, he regularly sent money home to support his aging mother. In this hard-working man's heart, he always cherished a dream. One day, he would save enough money to move his family to the suburbs and own his own restaurant. This dream motivated him to work tirelessly. By 2013, Yellen's small family had grown to include 4 children: Linda, age 9, Amy, age 7, Kevin, age 5, and William, just 13 months old. To care for the youngest child, Xiaojian had quit her job to become a full-time homemaker. The 3 older children attended the elementary school near their home. However, a horrific tragedy on October 26, 2013, would suddenly destroy Yilon and Xiaojian's happy family. Around 10:45 p.m. on Saturday, October 26, 2013, the New York City Police Department received an emergency call. A woman's trembling, panicked voice reported that something had happened at her cousin's house. The perpetrator had been subdued by her husband, and police should come immediately. Coincidentally, 2 detectives from the NYPD's 66th precinct were nearby handling a robbery case. They immediately drove to the scene upon receiving the report. Upon arrival, they saw a man in a gray tank top, barefoot and covered in blood, being restrained by another man. Next to the man in the tank top were a pair of scissors and a bloody cleaver. The woman who had called the police identified herself as Ting Ting. She informed them that her sister-in-law and 4 nieces and nephews were inside the house, all seriously injured, and the perpetrator was the restrained man. After handcuffing the suspect, the 2 detectives entered the house. They were shocked by the horrific scene before them. The floor was covered in blood. In the kitchen, Chao Jean, 37, and her son Kevin, 5, lay in pools of blood. They had multiple wounds on their bodies, particularly on their torsos, and their throats were nearly severed. Miraculously, both mother and son were still breathing. When paramedics brought the mother and son out, Kevin was unconscious and Chao Jin couldn't speak. She tried to use her fingers to make the number 4, asking about her 4 children, but because many of her fingers had been cut during the struggle with the attacker, she could only raise 2 fingers on each hand. Before learning the fate of her children, Chao Jin lost consciousness and was rushed to the ambulance. Paramedics also worked urgently to stop Kevin's bleeding and performed CPR, but by the time they reached the hospital, the 5-year-old boy had passed away. Not long after, Chao Jin also died at the hospital. At the scene, the tragedy wasn't over. When the 2 detectives entered the bedroom, a heartbreaking sight awaited them. Linda and Amy lay motionless, showing no signs of life. Even little William, just 13 months old, hadn't escaped the killer's cruel hands. The deep wounds in the necks of all 3 children were testament to the brutality and inhumanity of the perpetrator, who hadn't hesitated to attack children who could barely speak. The devastating news left Yilin stunned. In just one night, he had lost everything. His wife and 4 young children had all been taken from him unjustly. The pain was almost too much to bear. But the truth became even more painful when he learned that the perpetrator Ting Ting's husband had caught wasn't a stranger, but Yiolin's own cousin, Qin Mingdong. Chen Maidong was born in 1988 in Chang'an, Fujian Province, China. His father, Chen Yidong, was the younger brother of Yilan's mother. The relationship between the two families was so close that they had pooled their money to build a 4-story house in the village where they lived together. Maidong was the eldest son in the family, with a younger brother named Chen Minghang, who was 5 years younger. The family had also adopted a daughter named Chen Nana. According to Maidong's mother, at that time, villagers had a common belief about the path to success. They thought that going abroad to work was better than pursuing education, as schooling took much time and didn't guarantee high earnings. Among the 7 sons in Mindong's extended family, already settled in America, this reinforced the belief that rather than spending time studying, it was better to go to America to make money and then return home to marry. Influenced by this mindset, Mindong abandoned his education after completing 7th grade and drifted aimlessly. When he was 16, his family had to borrow from everywhere to gather $70,000 to pay smugglers to take Mindong illegally into America. Yet even on the day of departure, Mindong showed his irresponsibility. He was so absorbed in playing video games at an internet cafe that he forgot about his departure time. His father had to personally go to the cafe, drag his son out, and hand him over to the traffickers. Mindong traveled with the smugglers from Shenzhen to Hong Kong, then to Taiwan, and finally to Hawaii. The smugglers instructed Mindong to tear up his passport before landing. In Hawaii, they taught him that without a passport at immigration, he would be detained in a holding facility for investigation. At that point, as long as his relatives in America prepared enough money, they could bail him out. Everything went according to plan. Mindong was detained by U.S. authorities at a juvenile immigrant detention center in Arizona. Upon arrival, he was extremely surprised because the detention center wasn't what he had imagined, but looked more like a boarding school. There, he learned English and received free room and board. Most of the detainees were young men his age, who had also immigrated illegally. After being bailed out by relatives in America, Mindong continued to borrow more money to hire a lawyer to apply for a green card, claiming political asylum. This was a common reason used by many illegal immigrants to America. While waiting for his green card, Mindong found work to earn money. His job was working in the kitchen, preparing fried foods at a Chinese restaurant in New York. This was his first job, and working in the kitchen was quite demanding, mainly frying dishes like chicken, pork, beef, spring rolls, and vegetables. In summer, standing in front of hot oil made him sweat profusely, with oil splattering on his body, often making him dizzy from the heat. But the pay was low. Mindong worked hard for 12 hours a day, 6 days a week, but only received $300 per week in wages. After a year of grueling kitchen work, Mindong decided to seek work further away to earn money. He found restaurants in the suburbs that provided room and board, and had few opportunities to spend money. These were ideal places to save money. For the next 8 years, Mindong worked at more than 10 takeout restaurants, mainly in suburban Chicago. Every week, he would take a bus from New York to the restaurants with his clothes and personal belongings. Work began at 9 a.m. and ended at 10 p.m. During his shift, he had 1 hour for meals and rest. After work, he would return to the staff quarters and go online to chat and update his social media status. After several years of saving, Mindong paid off his debt to the smugglers. Every Chinese New Year, he would send to $4,000 to his family. On other holidays like the Mid-Autumn Festival and Dragon Boat Festival, he would send a few $100s. This was said to be a custom among Fujian people working away from home. Thanks to the money his son sent home along with their savings, Mr. Chun Idong planned to build a 3-story house in the village. When Mrs. Chun Ijia, his sister and Juilan's mother, learned of this, she discussed it with her brother, and decided to contribute money to expand it to a 4-story house. After construction, both families moved in together. While family life back home grew increasingly warm and harmonious, Mindong's life in America faced many difficulties. Because of his quiet nature and lack of social skills, he frequently argued and even fought with colleagues. He often updated his status on social media. Through these status updates, we can glimpse Mindong's state of mind. He wrote things like, "Men bleed but don't cry. If you lose a fight, don't tell your family. Don't harm those who don't harm you." It was clear that Mindong was poor at communication and preferred using violence to solve problems. As a result, his work was unstable. No one wanted to work with him. Sometimes he would work at a restaurant for a few months, sometimes just a few days before quitting. Whenever he was unemployed, he would sink into depression. He would smoke and gamble away his savings. At first, he would occasionally invite friends to play games and chat, but he became increasingly withdrawn, quiet, and preferred to be alone. After changing many jobs in late 2012, a discouraged Mindong went to Jacksonville, Florida to seek help from his uncle, who owned a restaurant there. In his uncle's eyes, Mindong was a quiet, hard-working young man. He diligently sent money home to his parents and shared fruit with his kitchen colleagues. His uncle thought Mindong was just a kind young man trying to earn money, and saw nothing unusual about him. However, after working for his uncle for half a year, an unexpected event changed the course of Mindong's life. On June 17, 2013, while working in the kitchen, Mindong received a call from his lawyer. The lawyer asked why he hadn't appeared in court that day. Mindong was bewildered, saying he didn't know he had to be in court. The lawyer informed him that due to his unexplained absence, the judge in Chicago considered this contempt of court and had rejected his political asylum application. The court ordered Mindong's deportation. From that day on, Mindong again became an illegal immigrant. He could no longer work legally or stay in America legally. Upon hearing this thunderbolt of news, he immediately flew back to Chicago to meet with his lawyer, but it was too late. The lawyer informed him that the judge's decision had been issued, and he was now illegally staying in America. But Mindong still had one last chance, his adopted sister Nana. When Nana learned of the situation, she called her brother and proposed they enter into a fake marriage. Nana wasn't Mindong's biological sister. She had been adopted by his family when very young. Nana's biological father had also illegally immigrated to America long ago. After getting his green card, he had become a U.S. citizen and sponsored his wife and 3 children, including Nana. At this time, Nana was working and only needed to pass her test to become a U.S. citizen. Then she could help her brother get a green card through a fake marriage. The problem was that Mindong didn't want a fake marriage. He told Nana he wanted a real marriage. He wanted to get a green card, become a U.S. citizen, and also wanted to marry Nana. But Nana immediately refused. She was only 18 and had always seen Mindong as a real brother. A fake marriage was possible, but a real marriage was out of the question. Learning that he still couldn't get a green card despite enduring 9 long hard years in America, Mindong completely broke down. He became depressed and spent his days smoking and gambling. When his money ran out with no other options, he returned to Florida to work illegally in his uncle's restaurant. But this time, his uncle noticed Mindong had completely changed. He was no longer the kind, hard-working young man he used to be. From June to September 2013, while working at his uncle's restaurant, Mindong often appeared dazed and distracted. He worked unfocused and frequently disappeared without reason. Once, while smoking in the dormitory, Mindong caused a fire, though fortunately it was extinguished in time. Though he was his nephew, his uncle could no longer accept Mindong's attitude and behavior. He fired him and advised him to seek psychological help. When he arrived in New York, Mindong also looked for work, but couldn't find any suitable jobs. He spent most of his time using drugs and gambling with friends. Every time he lost at gambling, he would violently smash the gambling machines. Mindong called his mother up to 4 times a day. He asked about the house construction and whether the family needed money. Once he told his mother that a fellow villager had called the night before, asking him when he would go to court, when he would get his green card, and when he would get married. When Mindong recounted his situation, this friend had mocked him, saying, "You're so useless. You've been in America for so many years and have nothing to show for it." The humiliation made this grown man break down, crying while talking to his mother. He kept repeating this story, sometimes speaking nonsensically. What worried his mother most was that her son often couldn't sleep and would hear voices speaking to him, but couldn't make out what they were saying. She feared her son's mental state was deteriorating. Concerned for her son, his mother called Nana, asking her to visit her brother in New York and take him to see a doctor. What seemed like helpful intervention would later become something Mindong's mother would deeply regret. At this time, Mindong was staying at Yelon and Xiaojun's home. Xiaojun's niece later recalled, "Previously, my aunt didn't have a habit of cooking breakfast. My 4 siblings usually had milk and bread, or steamed buns for breakfast. But after Uncle Mindong came to stay, she started cooking breakfast, and sometimes even made afternoon snacks for me. Uncle Mindong would also buy candies and snacks for the children. When Aunt went shopping, he would help watch the kids. Generally, the relationship between Uncle Mindong and my aunt's family was quite good at first. Everything began to change on October 23rd, when Nana came to visit her brother. At that time, Xiaojun was out shopping, and 5-year-old Kevin opened the door to find Uncle Mindong and Nana in an intimate position. The innocent child said, "Uncle Maindong and Nana are getting married," but the child's innocent remark touched on the tension between Nana and Maindong. Angry, she struck Kevin, making him cry. She then pushed Kevin out of the room. The 5-year-old child stood crying outside the door. Shortly after, when Chao Jin returned from shopping and heard her son's story, she became furious. She opened the door to find Kevin had vomited on the floor, and no one had cleaned it up, making her even angrier. She called her son inside, but Kevin trembled, saying Nana wouldn't let him in. Hearing this, Chao Jin said loudly, "This is our house. Why do we need her permission to enter?" She pulled her son inside and turned to Maindong and Nana, saying, "You two adults couldn't even properly watch 3 children. And you couldn't even clean up when you saw the mess." The conflict immediately erupted, with Chao Jin and Ma Dong and Nana exchanging heated words. Before leaving, Nana made a cutting remark to her brother. "If this family treats you like this, how can you have the face to stay here anymore?" Then she left. Chao Jin later told her husband Yi Lin about the incident. After hearing it, Yi Lin didn't want to make a big deal of it, fearing it would affect family relationships, so he tried to calm things down. He took Maidong to a nearby mahjong parlor and said, "Stay here for a few days temporarily," but Maidong refused, saying the mahjong parlor was too noisy and he couldn't sleep there. Finally, he went to stay with a paternal uncle in New York. However, after staying there for just 1 day, on October 24th, Maidong returned to Yilin's home. He told Chao Jun that he wasn't comfortable staying at his uncle's house and preferred staying there. On the evening of October 26th, Yilin wasn't home, because he had to work at the restaurant. At this time, little Kevin was playing in the living room, while the other 3 children were sound asleep. After finishing the housework, Chao Jin tried calling her husband, but perhaps because he was busy at the restaurant, Yilin didn't answer. She then turned to talk on the phone with her mother-in-law, Mrs. Ijai, back in their hometown. During the conversation, Mrs. Ijai reminded her daughter-in-law, "Your house is small, and you have 4 young children. Having Maindong stay there is really inconvenient. Moreover, Maindong seems mentally unstable lately. I'm worried he might do something to the children." She advised her daughter-in-law not to let Maindong stay anymore, and to ask him to move elsewhere soon. Chao Jin agreed with her mother-in-law's opinion. She told her mother about how Nana had hurt Kevin, but she also added, "Maindong is pitiful too, mother. Having to make a living alone far from home with no parents by his side. Well, he's family after all. We should help if we can." But while Chao Jin was trying to speak kindly of Maindong, she looked into the kitchen and saw a terrifying sight, Maindong holding a knife, and beside him was little Kevin crying loudly. It was around 10:40 p.m. when she hurriedly ended the phone call with her mother-in-law saying, "Mother, he's holding a knife." She immediately rushed to the kitchen, but what could a woman and 4 children do in such a situation? The tragedy unfolded as we learned at the beginning. After the call with her daughter-in-law was cut off, Mrs. Yijai had a terrible feeling and frantically called Tingting, Yelin's cousin who was also in New York. At this time, Maindong was changing clothes in the house, wearing new jeans and a tank top that Nana had bought him a few days before. That's why when he was arrested, his clothes were clean, only his bare feet were covered in blood. When they received the call, Tingting and her husband quickly went to Yelin's house and were the first to arrive at the scene. When they got there, the house was eerily quiet. Tingting's husband knocked on the door several times, but it took a while before Maindong opened it. Perhaps he was preparing to flee at this point, so he wasn't carrying any weapons. Tingting's husband immediately tackled and subdued him, while Tingting quickly called the police. After being arrested, the police arranged for a Chinese-speaking officer to interpret for Maindong. However, during the interrogation, an unexpected situation occurred. Although one hand was handcuffed to the table, he suddenly stood up, kicking the table toward the interpreter. Not stopping there, he used his free hand to attack the detective standing beside him. This rash action was immediately subdued by 2 officers, and as a result, Maindong faced additional charges beyond his initial crimes. When he calmed down, Maindong recounted the entire incident in Chinese. He said that he was coming out of the bedroom when he heard his sister-in-law complaining he couldn't control himself, and went to the kitchen to get the knife they used for cooking. Then attacked everyone in the house, starting with Kaya's hand, Kevin, then Ami, Linda, and William. He claimed he didn't hear the children's screams. During the interrogation, Maindong expressed resentment toward the children, complaining that they often ordered him to do housework, but he said he had no conflict with his sister-in-law. Finally, he wrote a confession in messy handwriting, which included Since coming to America, I've worked for many restaurants. Many things have happened. I've gotten into fights in restaurants. Lately I've been in New York, always going back and forth in Elon's house. All my friends are married, while I have to wander around and Flushing in Brooklyn's Chinatown. I've been thinking too much and can't sleep. Today I used a knife to kill my sister-in-law and the children. Perhaps due to his low education level, combined with mental health issues, Mindong's confession was very disjointed and grammatically incorrect, making it difficult for police to fully understand his intended meaning. After the case was made public outrage was directed not only at the perpetrator, but also at another person. Many blamed her for igniting the conflict between Mindong and Elon's family that erupted into tragedy. Under intense public pressure, Nana suffered serious consequences, including losing her job and living in fear, afraid to leave her house for fear of being attacked. Although wanting to cooperate with police in the investigation, her fear of being attacked prevented her from coming to New York. However, Nana insisted she wasn't avoiding responsibility. Her phone was always ready to receive calls from police and lawyers. Nana explained that on that day, while helping her brother try on new clothes, Kevin had accidentally seen them and teased that they were going to get married. She felt embarrassed and couldn't control herself, so she slapped Kevin. A few days later, the 3 children had eaten all of her calcium supplements and worried about their health effects. She made them drink lots of water. Kevin was punished by having to stand outside. That was why he had vomited. Nana admitted she was wrong in both incidents, but Chao Jin had been forgiving, never scolding her or her brother, though her attitude had become somewhat cold. Nana felt guilty and didn't want to stay anymore, so on October 19th, a week before the murders, she left New York and returned to work at the restaurant. Nana's testimony and that of the victim's niece differed in many points, both in timing and sequence of events. Nana denied having an intimate relationship with her brother, saying she was just helping him change clothes. She also claimed that slapping Kevin and his vomiting were 2 separate incidents that happened at different times. 2 weeks after the murders, at 1:45 p.m. on November 10, 2013, the funeral for Chao Jin and her 4 children was held at Forest Hill Cemetery in New Jersey. Because William was only 1 year old, the family couldn't bear to let him lie alone, so they decided to place him in his mother's arms in the same grave. At the funeral, Zhu Elon, Mrs. Chen Yijai, and other family members were overcome with grief, their heartbreaking cries echoing throughout the cemetery. Many funeral attendees couldn't hold back their tears. A month after his wife and children were buried, in December 2013, Elon bought a plane ticket and decided to leave this land of tragic memories. Upon returning to his hometown, Zhu Elon couldn't adjust to life there. His mental state deteriorated. Whenever he saw other families' children, he would remember his own 4 beloved children. The pain was so great that he wanted to join his wife and children. As we know, Mrs. Chun Yixai, Zhu Elon's mother, and Mr. Chen Yidong, Mindong's father, were siblings. They had built a 4-story house together to live in. Though the 2 families lived on separate floors, they saw each other daily. One side was the victim's family, the other the perpetrator's family. It was an incredibly awkward situation. The atmosphere in the house quickly became tense and heavy. Though Mindong had committed his crime in America and was imprisoned there, his relatives at home were also affected. Chao Jin's relatives had repeatedly come to Mr. Mindong Yidong's house to cause trouble. Finally, facing the upheaval at home, after some time back, Zhu Elon returned to New York. He felt New York was better. His wife and children were buried there, and though it was a foreign land, he couldn't leave them. He had to stay there to visit them occasionally, and he also wanted to witness Chun Mindong receive his legal punishment. On January 27, 2014, test results showed that Mindong had signs of severe mental illness and could not continue participating in the trial or defend himself. Therefore, the judge decided to postpone the trial and send Mindong for treatment first. After several months of treatment, on June 28, 2014, Mindong finally appeared in court. This was the first time the victim's family faced the killer, who had cruelly taken the lives of their loved ones. Joy Elon's sister couldn't contain her pain and anger when she saw the cruel murderer who had killed her sister-in-law and nieces and nephews. She jumped up from her seat, pointed at Mindong and shouted, "You destroyed my family." Meanwhile, Elon's mother fainted multiple times from the overwhelming pain. 2 years after the horrific crime, after multiple court appearances on October 7, 2015, Chen Mindong finally agreed to plead guilty. At 2:30 p.m. that day, Maindong in prison clothes and handcuffs entered the courtroom. Judge Judy stated, after reviewing Chun Mindong's plea agreement, "I will only accept this agreement if he never returns to society." Both Mindong's lawyer and the district attorney's office agreed. The tragedy of the Zhou family isn't just a story about a bloody murder, it's a painful portrait of shattered American dreams. On one side was a hard-working man who diligently built his family's happiness, only to witness his wife and 4 young children brutally murdered. On the other was Chun Maindong, who, when his illusions of life in a foreign land crumbled, allowed temporary madness to destroy not only the lives of innocent children, but also the bonds between 2 once close families.